Good evening. It's 9 o'clock, an hour to go until the polls close, an hour to go until we reveal the findings of the exit poll, an hour to go in the Brexit election. Good evening. It's 6 weeks now since Parliament voted to trigger the Brexit election, and now there's less than an hour to run. Tonight, who'll govern Britain for the next 5 years should become clear, and here from the heart of Sky, we'll bring you every result. To guide us, our political editor, Beth Rigby, and the man who's come to define politics in modern Britain, the House of Commons Speaker for the last decade, John Bercow. More from him in a moment. Well, it could be a long night tonight, and here in our Sky Election Centre, we'll be using all the tools at our disposal to predict its course. That begins in just 58 minutes' time with the release of the broadcaster's exit poll, so often questioned by politicians, but very rarely wrong. It's the moment you'll learn the likely path of this election. First, though, to our very special guest.
Order! Order! Order!
He's not naturally a quiet man.
Don't gesticulate, don't rant, spare us the theatrics.
He has strong views on a lot of things, so he likes debating.
Quite frankly, young man, you can like it or lump it.
He's done it with absolute commitment, ruthless efficiency, and along the way there's been some collateral damage.
You really are a very, very, very generous bunch of people indeed.
Well, John Bercow, welcome to Sky News. How are you feeling?
Excited and privileged. Privileged to be on the Sky News team for election night. The best, most focused, without question, quickest, sharpest political news team to be found anywhere in the UK.
You are very kind. The exit poll, the first big events of the evening. Very, very important pointer as to how things might go.
Yes, of course, it's important to understand what the exit poll is. It's not just like any other poll. Other polls ask people how they are going to vote. The exit poll, of course, asks people, when they come out of the polling stations, how they have voted. And although politicians don't always like to hear the exit poll on 4 out of the last 5 occasions has been accurate in its basic thrust in predicting either a hung parliament or a majority government.
Pretty good point here. OK, that comes up at 10. Also with me throughout the night, our political editor, Beth Rigby. Now, she, of course, has tracked the parties and their leaders throughout this gruelling general election campaign. Beth, well, all that work comes to a conclusion tonight. You're in the warm studio.
I've done a few thousand miles. I think what an extraordinary period of British politics this is, isn't it? And here we are in the December election, the first in nearly a century. But it is, as everyone will know, our third general election in nearly under 5 years. Yep. And the two contenders this week, they were up and down the country, a dizzying tour as they're trying to pick up votes. Jeremy Corbyn, 15 pit stops in 3 days from Glasgow right down to Bristol, and Boris Johnson, 11 stops, concentrating his efforts in the Midlands and the North in places like Great Grimsby, fighting for every vote right up until the polls close in this awful weather, but they'll still be trying to turn out the vote.
I'm counting down to that polls closing in the exit poll, 56 minutes or so. Well, elections can be difficult to follow, of course, but you'll be able to get all the key data right here. There it is at the bottom of this screen. This is our election vidi printer. It's going to tell you the result of that exit poll we've been talking about after it's released, 10 o'clock, and the latest seats to declare then coming after that. It then keeps a running tally of the number of MPs that each and every one of those parties have won. Well, also here at Sky News, we've always believed that the election night story is told as much outside the studio as here. And tonight, my colleagues will be right across the country, starting with the party leaders. First to the Conservative and Labour camps, and Anna Botting and Sophie Ridge. Anna, any nerves there?
Indeed, so always nerves, not least the counters, Dermot. 12 candidates standing here in the seat of Uxbridge and South Ruislip. As you said, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, is the incumbent, taking the seat first in 2015 and then winning again here in 2017. We are at the extremities of West London, if I can put it like that, a constituency dominated in part by neighbouring Heathrow Airport. Brunel University is here too, which is where this count and that of 2 others will take place tonight, including that of the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell. Expecting all the candidates to arrive later, the Prime Minister included. So where is he now? Well, let's take you to Downing Street, and our political correspondent Kate McCann, who has been following the Tory leader for the past 5 weeks. And Kate, the Prime Minister standing by tonight there in Downing Street.
That's right, Anna. Boris Johnson is here in Downing Street behind me, where he will be nervously awaiting that exit poll at 10 o'clock, as the rest of us are. It's been a long campaign for all the candidates. The Prime Minister has travelled over 10,000 miles in this general election campaign, covered every region of the country, and now it all comes down to what happens next. He will be with advisers in Downing Street, talking about some of the very many ways that this election could go next and what might happen next. He's having something to eat and drink, trying to get ready for the long night ahead before he will head to Uxbridge, where the votes will be counted, where you are, Anna, and where I will be later. We saw the Prime Minister casting his ballot this morning in Westminster. He took his dog, Dylan, along with him for that. So, a long night ahead. The Prime Minister will head from here to Uxbridge, where he will see out that count, and depending on what happens next, he could be returning to Downing Street, or it could well have another incumbent.
Kate McCann, thank you very much indeed. Well, the declaration for John McDonnell's constituency is due at about 4 a.m. That of Uxbridge, where the Prime Minister is standing, due at about 4:30 in the morning. Well, what about the Labour leader? Let's get the very latest now from Sophie Ridge.
Thank you, Anna. Well, welcome to the Sobel Leisure Centre in Islington North, constituency of one Jeremy Corbyn. This particular area of North London is home to 2 constituencies. There'll be 2 counts going on tonight, Jeremy Corbyn's count in Islington North, and they'll also be totting up the votes in Islington South and Finsbury, which is the constituency of the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Emily Thornberry. To give you a bit of a steer on how long you're going to have to wait to get those results, the Islington South and Finsbury seat normally declares first. Last year it was around 1 in the morning. The Islington North constituency, a little bit later, it was about 3 a.m. last time that we heard the results of Jeremy Corbyn's seat. And that's when you're going to be getting the acting returning officer taken to the stage that I hope you should be able to see just behind me, to have her moment in the spotlight announcing that results. That's the Chief Executive of the Council as well. But it's a huge operation on the ground, as these seats always are. They've had 650 people out and about in polling stations across Islington as people cast their ballots. One person who cast his vote a little bit earlier today was the Labour leader himself, and Sky's home editor, Jason Farrell, has been following the Labour campaign and is now outside Jeremy Corbyn's home tonight. Jason, a few nerves, do you think?
Yes, I think, although he didn't look too nervous. I saw him just a moment ago. I'll talk about that in a minute. He's obviously had this 500-mile trek yesterday from Glasgow to London, but he didn't take his foot off the gas. This morning he was out casting his vote, as you say, at 9:30. He was with his wife, Laura. Then he was out campaigning. He stopped off for a few cups of coffee. Then it was back here. I didn't think I'd have much to tell you, but actually, I can tell you he has gone out for dinner tonight. When I was here just about 20 minutes ago, he came out of the house again with one of his advisors and his wife, Laura. I told him he was going off for dinner, and he said that they weren't sure whether he was going to come back here at all, actually. He did tell me that he thought the count in Islington, when I was on the campaign with him, would come back at about 2 a.m. But as you say, previously it's come back a little bit later than that, around about 3 a.m. I think by then he'll have a pretty good idea of the way things are going. When I was here last time back in 2017, they were having a sweepstake back here on what would happen. Obviously, this time, wherever they are, they'll be very much glued to those exit polls and a lot more up for grabs than who wins the sweepstake.
Yeah, the Labour leaders team and the rest of us as well. Jason, thank you. And of course, it's when that exit poll comes in around 50 minutes' time that the work will really start for the 150 people here in the room. They've already started arriving. Lots of them are on their seats, ready to go just as soon as those ballot boxes start arriving. And we'll, of course, bring you the results as soon as we'll get them. Dermot, in the meantime, back to you in the studio.
OK, Sophie, thank you very much indeed. And thank you, Anna, very much as well. We'll be hearing much more, of course, from you both throughout the evening. Now, tonight, here in our Sky Election Centre, we're going to be analysing the numbers and the trends which will define this election. At the last election, Sky News was the first to call that it was going to be a hung parliament, that no party would have an outright majority, more than an hour ahead of our rivals. That unexpected result that so took the wind out of Theresa May's sails. Well, talking us through the results tonight is Sky's Ed Conway. Ed.
What is the aim of every party in an election? Well, of course, it's to get their leader into number 10 Downing Street, winning a majority of seats in Parliament. So here's our winning line from last time around. You can see the Conservatives won 318 seats. They fell short of that line by 8 seats. And although Labour gained seats, they finished with 262. So we got a hung Parliament. The Tories had to join forces with the DUP to form a government. This time, they'll be hoping to win back some of the seats they lost in 2017. So let's see how things looked after the last election. These are the number of seats won by each party. Look at them. There they are on our dashboard there. And you can see behind them, if we fly by there, our hexagon map of the UK. At the top, you can see a lot of SNP yellow there in Scotland, but there's also some blue there. The Conservatives gained a dozen new Scottish MPs in 2017. The rest of the country is mostly Conservative blue and Labour red. You can see Labour did well in the west, gaining seats in Wales and the southwest, and you've got some Lib Dem yellow in London, where they also gained seats. But there'll be some big names missing from tonight as well. Philip Hammond and Amber Rudd, two former cabinet ministers who aren't standing at this election. Labour losing Deputy Leader Tom Watson and former Sports Minister Kate Hoey. Sir Vince Cable too, the former Lib Dem leader, and Lady Sylvia Herman, who sat as an independent in Northern Ireland. They are among more than 70 MPs who won't be standing this time around. In all, the Commons will lose more than 1,000 years of parliamentary experience.
Well, tonight, joining Ed Conway in crunching those numbers will be our team of psephologists, experts in the study of elections and voting trends. Sky's election analyst for every election since Sky News was founded, indeed, Professor Michael Thrasher. Well, he's right now inside those exit poll deliberations, which will be able to bring you the result of, let me remind you, 10 o'clock on the dot. But do not fear, because our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, is here and joins me now. And Sam, tell us more about this exit poll.
Thank you, Dermot. So, on the stroke of 10 p.m, the first indication of the nation's decision with the Sky News, BBC and ITV News exit poll. Throughout the day, Ipsos Mori interviewed around 30,000 people coming out of polling stations in 144 different locations. Voters fill in replica ballot papers after they cast their vote, which is what makes this exercise different to conventional polls. Will someone have won an outright majority? Will it be another hung parliament? The exit poll has captured the shock and the drama before. Just 2 years ago, the exit poll was a surprise to almost everybody. So hold your breath. Those results in just under 50 minutes' time.
OK, Sam, thank you very much indeed. Well, on election night, it's the battle, of course, to be first in Parliament that really counts. But at least for the next 2 hours, we'll also be focused on another race. That's to be the first constituency to declare in this general election. Now, for 5 elections, those keen followers amongst you will know that until 2017, that crown was claimed by Sunderland. But last time round, their local rival, Newcastle, no less, pipped them to the post. And this is the scene right now in those 2 great cities as the teams there prepare to collect and count those ballot papers as quickly as possible. All being well, we could hear the first result in less than 2 hours' time. And these are the people who'll tell us who's going to win that race. Gillian Joseph and Sarah Jane Mead. Gillian, the team there in Newcastle, well, as I was saying, they hold the crown. Are they confident of hanging on to it?
Absolutely so, Dermot. You get the sense that there is a rivalry going on here. A healthy one, or we should say it is a healthy rivalry, but there is one going on. You can see already that the postal votes are coming in behind me, those ballot boxes on the table there, so it's all underway in earnest. Now, we'll be taking the count from 3 constituencies here this evening, from Newcastle, Central, East and North. And there's a lot at stake, as you said, because Newcastle took the crown in 2017 for being the fastest constituency to declare. They declared at 11:01, and just 9 minutes afterwards, Sunderland came in second, not a position that they were happy with, because, as you say, since 1992, they've held the crown for being the fastest constituency to declare. So there's a lot to play for this evening. In Newcastle, they've even changed their venue. They used to be at the Civic Hall. They're in this sports centre because it's larger. Two reasons: it's larger, and also because these back doors mean that vehicles can drive straight up to the doors and run in with the boxes, and that all adds up to valuable minutes, which will be crucial in the race with Sunderland. So who will reclaim the crown? Will it be Newcastle or will it be Sunderland? Let's take you over to the rival camp now at Sunderland with Sarah Jane Mee.
Gillian, hello. Well, can Sunderland win back its crown? They are ready to welcome to the Sunderland side of this election derby. Over the course of the night here, we're going to be getting the results of 3 votes. Houghton and Sunderland Central and Washington and Sunderland West. Now, back in June 2017, all 3 seats here were won by the Labour Party, with the Conservatives in second place. The early attention tonight will be on Houghton and Sunderland South. As Dermot and Gillian both said, it reigned supreme in terms of declaring first until it was just pipped to the post back in 2017 by Newcastle Central. The team here hoping to recapture that old magic, which also saw them achieve the fastest ever declaration. That came back in 2015 at 10:48 p.m, less than an hour after the polls closed. If that happens, I'll be going home early and watching the rest of the coverage from a hotel. Now, you might be asking, how on earth do they do all this? Well, over 1,000 people are here to help out as part of the count team. They're all limbering up behind me. You can hear the noise is getting louder. They also took a step a few years ago to make their ballot papers thinner, and that makes it easier to count and, of course, much quicker. Well, time will only tell if all of these preparations help them regain their title. In around half an hour, I'm going to speak to the returning officer for this Sunderland count to get more on the operation being run here and how they think it's going to go. So we'll be talking to him a little bit later on. But for now, Dermot, back to you.
I'm sure it's going to be tight. Gillian, Sarah Jane, thank you both. We'll be hearing much more from you over the next couple of hours. Well, now, the trends that decide this election could prove to be amongst the most difficult to define of modern times. There are so many dividing lines now, not just the traditional questions of left and right and so on and so forth. Tonight, we have a new tool to explore the election battleground, and Ed's up here now to explain it. Tell us about it then, Ed.
That's right, Dermot. I mean, it's election night. It's all about numbers, and boy, have we got some interesting ways of showing you what's going on beneath the surface. You saw over there in the atrium the big banners that might tell you the scores. Let's have a look at some of the background stories, because every election, of course, is different, but this election might be decided in an unexpected way. So let's have a look at the map which shows the UK and how it voted last time around, because that map is a key way of showing you just what happened in the last election. There you can see that hexagram map of the UK, and you can see the seats from last time around. Now, that geography tells you one story, but there are many ways of dicing those numbers, of looking at what's going on beneath the surface. And so you can also take those numbers and put them across and look at the Brexit vote across those seats. So this is the way that people voted in the referendum last time in 2016, all the way from those who voted for Remain on this side of the axis, moving through to those who voted more for Leave. So this is taking all of those constituencies and plotting them against that axis. We can also look, actually, when it comes to all sorts of different measures as well. So we have deprivation as well. This is the deprivation ranking, a kind of traditional class-based ranking of all the constituencies around the UK, again, from the most deprived through to the least deprived over here. And we'll have all sorts of other ways of being able to drill into those seats and show some unexpected parallels. So, for instance, consider a couple of constituencies. You've got Hazel Grove and North East Somerset. They're 180 miles apart, both with many similarities. So both voted 52% for Brexit. You can see that on the top. You can see there are other similarities as well. Virtually the same proportion of graduates. So there's a measure of education as well for each of these constituencies. The same proportion of people under the age of 45. So there's an age measure as well. And very similar numbers of people of an ethnic minority as well. 3% in Hazel Grove. And then you've got about 2%, just over 2% in Somerset North East. The question we'll be able to answer tonight is, could those similarities, could all of this data give us a pointer as to how people will actually vote?
You are well prepared, Ed. I think you're going to need to be. You are watching the Brexit election live on Sky News. In a moment, we'll have more on our special guest tonight, Speaker John Bercow.
Do you know who this is? This is the Prime Minister of the UK, no?
Order! Order!
Well, we'll be discovering how far the fame of the most high-profile parliamentarian of modern times has spread and, of course, speak to the man himself. You're watching the Brexit election on Sky News. There's around 40 minutes to go now until the polls close and the fate of the 3,321 candidates in total running in this election across the UK is sealed. Not among them, for the first time in 22 years, is the man sitting next to me. John Bercow was first elected as an MP back in 1997 and for the past 10 years has been, of course, the House of Commons Speaker. He's become much more than that, though, a symbol perhaps of Parliament and a phenomenon whose fame has spread well beyond Westminster, indeed beyond these shores. Take a look.
Do you know who this is?
This is the Prime Minister of the UK, no?
It's John Bercow, huh?
Order!
The alderman with the sentence order in the British Parliament.
Order! Order!
Would wear like some sort of extravagant tie, maybe?
Don't gesticulate, don't rant, spare us the theatrics.
He's not naturally a quiet man.
Difference of opinion is of the essence of politics.
He has strong views on a lot of things, so he likes debating.
Quite frankly, young man, you can like it or lump it.
He's always been a divisive figure. Whenever he's done anything, he's never done it by halves. He's done it with absolute commitment, ruthless efficiency, and along the way there's been some collateral damage.
Don't require any assistance from some junior minister. Absurd proposition. You need to write out 1,000 times. I will behave myself at Prime Minister's questions. It will not happen.
His expression is a little bit funny, and it is taken by a few musics.
The House must behave with decorum. There is an elaborate combination of finger-wagging and head-shaking going on. Very rude for members. Order! Have a lie down if necessary. You really are a very, very, very generous bunch of people indeed.
The state of my throat, which is purely temporary, is not down to the consumption of a kangaroo's testicle.
Members must calm down. This debate must be conducted in a seemly manner. Order! Order!
It's really funny, but I don't know.
Very rude for members. Order!
Order. You need it in every country. You need it in every country. Order. It's a good word.
And here he is watching all that, the man himself, John Bercow. And John, as I say, welcome once again to Sky News election night. There were some pretty weak attempts there at bringing everything to order. Could you bring this election night studio, put it in its...
If I was too weak, I shall aspire, Dermot, to be strong. Maybe I shall have to speak more loudly, or more regularly, or more insistently. But, of course, you are in the chair and you are calling me to order rather than the other way around.
Indeed.
I never remember that.
Indeed. I'm not sure I'll be able to match that, but it could be useful with some of the politicians we're going to have on the programme during the course of the evening. I'll just set you on them. Tell me, though, I mean, watching that, you genuinely are an international phenomenon. There were students there from Belgium, people from all over the world, some of them thinking you might have been the Prime Minister. Were you aware of that while you were in the House?
I became aware of it only very late in the day. It wasn't planned, it wasn't contrived, it was no part of my mission to become known throughout Europe or indeed, for that matter, beyond. For much of the time, you're almost hermetically sealed from the outside world when you are chairing debates for many, many, many hours uninterrupted. So if you ask me, did I give a thought to that, the answer's no. I suppose what brought it home to me was my family, and in particular my children.
Did they take the mickey out of you?
Who were very familiar with all this, saying to me, "Oh, it's very funny, Dad. Have you seen the mashup?" And I said, "I beg your pardon, what is the mashup of which you speak?" I'd never heard of a mashup. And then there was reference to memes that were audible and could be viewed
well, they get
on
out
YouTube.
They get out their phones and show you it, do they?
Yes, absolutely. And, of course, they're streets ahead of me in all of these matters. So I eventually became aware, and I must confess that at one point, much earlier this year, I went to Amsterdam to do a late-night television programme, and I was completely taken aback by two things. First, I arrived at the airport and about 10 people came up who had arrived on other flights in pursuit of selfies. And then as we went out of the airport, there was a little crowd of waiting taxi drivers expecting business. And one of them saw me and called out, "Order, order."
And you put him right there.
And I was completely taken aback.
Just very quickly, John, I mean, much more to discuss during the course of the evening. Not too much politics, though, of course, before 10 o'clock and the polls closing. You know, what are you going to do now? You're out of politics. What is it? A book, one imagines? Some public speaking, things like that?
Well, my first challenge, Dermot, and it's quite a serious and heavy one, is to overcome my natural shyness, reticence and self-effacement.
Indeed.
If I can accomplish that task, which I will go about with some commitment and vigour, you're pretty much on the right track. I've written a book, I'm doing a lot of public speaking, and I suppose if I tried to encapsulate it in a nutshell, I want to earn a living, have some fun and do some good.
OK, I can see we're in for quite a night. The shy retiring John Bercow there, much more from him, of course, coming up. Well, let's get back now to the constituencies. We visited the seats of the leaders of the Conservative and Labour parties, as you know. The Lib Dems are next, and my colleague Neil Patterson is going to be tracking Joe Swinson this evening. What's the mood there, Neil?
Well, evening, Dermot, and perhaps the biggest surprise of the general election. Sky News have sent the guy with the Scottish accent to Scotland, to Bishopbriggs, in fact. And whilst I may be a long way from home, welcome to the Leisure Drome. Yes, that is what this building is called, where the count for the constituency of Eastern Bartonshire is being held this evening. It was won, as you mentioned, back in 2017 by one Joe Swinson, now, of course, leader of the Liberal Democrats. She wasn't back then, with the SNP in second place. And they do tend to be pretty snappy with their counts here. Last time out in 2017, Joe Swinson's name was read out at around about 20 to 3, and I'm told they're going to be trying to do even better this time around. Of course, people have been voting elsewhere across Scotland, so we can take you briefly to Uddingston in South Lanarkshire, where, as you'll soon see, one Nicola Sturgeon was fulfilling her democratic duty and casting her vote a little earlier on today. She's, of course, not standing as an MP in the general election. She's probably got quite a bit on her plate being First Minister. But to bring you back here to the Leisure Drome, as I said, we're expecting that count from the Chief Executive of the Eastern Bartonshire Council at around about 3 o'clock this morning. We'll certainly be bringing you that live when it happens, and we'll have plenty more to talk about after the polls close in, just a little under half an hour's time.
Indeed. OK, Neil, thank you very much indeed. And you're watching the Brexit election on Sky News. In a moment, we'll cross to more of the seats where the election will be decided, including one close to my special guest's heart, as we count down to 10 o'clock. Welcome back. You're watching the Brexit election on Sky News with less than half an hour to go now until the polls close. Let me take you through the headlines. And Boris Johnson has returned to Downing Street after voting in London this morning. After voting in Islington in North London earlier, the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has left his home tonight. He's due to hear the result from his constituency around about 2 o'clock in the morning. And from the Nationalist Party's Nicola Sturgeon voted in South Lanarkshire, and Plaid Cymru's leader Adam Price voted in Carmarthenshire. Now then, for the first time ever, Sky News will have journalists at every count across the country to make sure we bring you the results as soon as they're declared. We've heard about Newcastle and Sunderland, but where else might we hear from earlier in the evening? Well, Sky's Helen Ann Smith is in Swindon and Katerina Vitozzi is in Wrexham. Let's start with you, Helen Ann, and you're in the first seat which declared in 2017 outside Sunderland and Newcastle. Do they have similar hopes on timing this time?
Quite possibly. There are 2 seats being counted and declared here in Swindon, South Swindon and North Swindon. Back in 2017, both of those constituencies were won by the Conservative candidates, and in both cases, Labour were the runners-up. Now, it's worth saying these counts being held in the Steam Railway Museum here in Swindon. You might be able to see the beautiful atrium behind me, lots of the counting officers just starting to arrive. It's the site of the old railway works here. Now, when this plant closed back in the late 80s, it had a huge impact on Swindon. Fast forward 30 years, it's now the Honda manufacturing car plant, due to close in 2021 with a loss of 3,500 jobs. But as you say, Dermot, the reason these constituencies are worth watching is because historically they have been some of the first southern constituencies to declare. I just had a quick word with the returning officer. She says they might be a little slower this year. They've got a new venue, a few fewer counting officers, but nevertheless, what happens here may give us some indication of what the night has in store.
Indeed. OK, Helen Ann, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Katerina Vitotti there in Wrexham. Katerina, Wrexham, traditionally one of the first seats to declare in Wales.
Yeah, we're expecting a return for Wrexham at about 2 a.m. There are 2 counts happening here at the Glyndŵr University Sports Hall, Wrexham and Cwyd South. We're expecting Wrexham first, Cwyd South a little bit after that. As I said, welcome to the University Sports Hall, where even just half an hour ago someone was fitting a last-minute treadmill session in the gym just to my right. But the faint whiff of workout is slowly ebbing away, instead replaced by a heady thrum of excitement as the vote counters arrive to start their task in about 20 minutes' time or so. Wrexham and Cwyd South, those 2 counts happening here. Labour held seats in 2017. Will that change this time around? Expect that result at around 2 a.m.
OK, Katerina, thank you very much indeed. Glad the whiff of workout is disappearing there in Wrexham. Well, as I said, Sky News has people in every constituency tonight to bring you the results as and when they are declared. That's just a sample of some of them. It's fair to say that one of them is especially relevant to my special guest this evening. John Bercow was the MP for Buckingham for more than 20 years, 22 in fact, and has stood in no less than 8 elections. John, first of all, just tell us about the life of a constituency MP, particularly at general election time, those nerves.
Well, it's a great privilege to be a constituency MP, and I'll never forget the feeling of elation and relief when I was first elected. The result declared at 10 to 6 in the morning on the 2nd of May 1997. But you referenced that point, Dermot, about nerves, and the truth is that I think the vast majority of candidates are afflicted by what is known in the trade as candidatitis. That is to say, they are nervous and sometimes neurotic, even if there is no obviously discernible reason why they should be.
So what, even if you're in a pretty safe seat or a very safe seat, you still think, oh, did something go wrong? Did something happen in this particular constituency that could unseat me?
Yes, and I think that's true at various stages in the campaign. For example, you can have a bad day. I remember in 1997 having a bad day, and a bad day meant meeting people who had previously voted Conservative and in some cases always voted Conservative, saying they weren't going to vote Conservative. And I remember going to dinner one night with my agent in a local pub, and he obviously anticipated what I was thinking. I was looking pretty miserable and forlorn, and I said to him, "Gordon, you don't think?" "No, John," he said to me. And I said, "But Gordon, you don't know what I'm going to ask you." And he said, "I think I know exactly what question is on the tip of your tongue." He said, "You're about to ask me, might you lose?" And I said, "Yes, I was going to ask that." And he said, "No, John, it is going to be a tough election, but on a uniform swing, the Conservative Party would have to be down to 7 seats to lose Buckingham. And that's not going to happen. Worry not," he said, "and enjoy your dinner."
Well, a lot of worried candidates out there tonight. And tonight, Sky News is producing not one but 2 election programmes. We're here on Sky News across the UK and worldwide on TV and Sky's mobile platforms. But we're also delivering the Brexit election social across social media networks. For more, let's join Sky's political correspondent, Lewis Goodall. He's presenting the election social. It begins in just a few minutes' time. Over to you, Lewis.
Yes, indeed, Dermot. We're in a parallel universe to you from over here. Very, very close, though, just over the balcony. And this is we're a first for Britain, a digital-only election programme aimed at all of those people who obsessively live their lives online, and all of the election geeks, and I dare say I might include myself in that as well. But don't worry, it's not just me. I'm not like Macaulay Culkin. I'm not home alone. I've got a whole panel, a vast panoply of the internet's savviest and best and most knowledgeable, or at least that's what they've told us anyway, who will be guiding us throughout the night, seeing what people are saying online, and as I say as well, bringing you the very geekiest cephalological analysis available. And the best thing about it is, Dermot, is that everyone can enjoy your programme as well. It's a main course, a meaty, carnivorous main course to our luscious vegan millennial side dish. So make sure you join us on Sky News digital platforms across the internet.
Complimentary. OK, Lewis, good luck. Thank you very much. Now, the unsung heroes of election night are the teams at these local councils, collecting and counting all the millions of ballot papers, all in an attempt to make sure we know the election result by round about breakfast tomorrow. We're going to hear from two of them now, first in Newcastle, and my colleague, Gillian Joseph. Gillian.
Dermot, thank you. Yes, they are the unsung heroes, and it's not just about declaring the result on the night. I have with me Pat Ritchie, who's been the returning officer for Newcastle for the last 8 years, and we were talking a little bit before. This is the culmination of many, many months of work, isn't it?
Yes, really this is the end of the process where staff involved in the election have been working right through from when the announcement of the election was made, taking nominations, organising polling stations, working on postal votes, issuing postal votes, dealing with hundreds and thousands of queries from the public about registration and about voting. And really when we get to the count, that's the end of the whole of the democratic process, although one of the most important parts of it.
Explain to us what it's like for you when you're up on that stage and you know the result and you're about to share that with the rest of the world. Is it nerve-wracking for you?
Well, it's quite a responsibility, really, you know, and it's quite. I'm quite proud of being involved in a number of democratic events, really, and. It's sort of nerve-wracking, but actually the organisation of the election and some of the things that can go wrong is in some ways more nerve-wracking. When you get to that stage, it's about really delivering the result on behalf of the people of Newcastle, really.
Pat Ritchie, thank you very much for talking to us there. Pat Ritchie, the returning officer for Newcastle. We shall be back to you a little later on in the programme, Dermot.
Yeah, and see if they've done it. Gillian, thank you very much indeed. That's Newcastle's hopes. Let's see what they're doing in Sunderland. Sarah Jane is there. Can they beat them, Sarah Jane?
Well, they're quietly confident, I have to say, Dermot. I'm with the returning officer here in Sunderland, Patrick Melia. Patrick, hello to you. Very exciting night tonight. How are the nerves?
Nerves are fine. No nerves at all. We've got a well-efficient, well-run team here, so looking forward to the evening.
It's interesting. How is the rivalry with Newcastle? Because in the 2017 election, I mean, I hate to remind you, but they did pick you to be the first to declare. And when Pat popped up, Pat Ritchie there, you went, I know Pat.
Yes.
Bit of rivalry between you and Pat to get there first.
On election night, it's all about an efficient, accurate election, nothing else. Coming first is not the main thing. I think the important thing is for the electorate and for the candidates, it's a smooth, efficient operation to give the accurate result.
OK. I mean, the buzz in this room, I mean, it's making me nervous. I know you've got nerves of steel. When can we expect the first boxes to arrive? Because looking at that countdown clock, we've got just under 15 minutes to go.
So we're in the Horton and Sunderland South constituency, so we're right in the centre of that constituency.
Nice
advantage. The first box should end up here 3 minutes past 10.
Those doors will burst open.
So the doors will burst open and you'll see a box come through the door.
Now, a lot of practice goes into this. Obviously, there's so much build-up in a general election campaign to voting day. But in terms of practising what goes on here in this hall, you have local school children helping you out. There's a relay going on outside there in the cold and the rain.
Yeah, no, the local sixth form, St Aidan, St Anthony's, every year the sixth formers turn up and they help us, whether it's a local election or a national election, with the relay, getting the ballot boxes from the vans into the building to the right place within the building. And it's great just to see them being involved in the democratic process.
And it all comes in here, 28 teams, and how many counters in each team?
So there's there's 3 counters in the team, but across the board we have around 300 counters across the 3 different constituencies.
Oh, and their fingers are at the ready for 3 minutes past 10, when we'll be having our eyes on those doors at the back of this room as they burst open, those boxes come in. Patrick, good luck to you. Patrick Melia, returning officer. I know you're watching that countdown clock. You've got to go, so we'll let you go. Busy night ahead. Lovely to see you. Thank you. Right, well, that is it from Sunderland for the moment. We'll keeping our eye on that countdown clock because, as I said, they're quietly confident that they're going to be first to declare tonight.
OK. Sarah J, Gillian, best of luck to you both. I'm staying neutral on this one. And you're watching the Brexit election on Sky News. Just 13 minutes to go now until 10 o'clock. And we can bring you the exit poll whose hopes could be dashed tonight. OK, you're watching the Brexit election on Sky News, and there are just 9 minutes to go until polls close. And we bring you the results of the broadcaster's exit poll. Well, we've heard from the constituency counts of the leaders of the Conservatives, Labour and Lib Dems, and the place is vying to be first. Sky News is live at more than 200 counts tonight, and these 6 are amongst them. James Matthews is in Glasgow, David Blevins is in Belfast, Katie Spencer is in Brighton, Noel Phillips is in Kensington, and Gerard Tubb is in Hartlepool, and Inzamam Rashid is in Walthamstow in North East London. To you first, James. Glasgow, as ever, a key place, of course, we'll be watching for tonight.
That's right, yeah. Hello from the cavernous SEC on the banks of the River Clyde, Dermot. The stage about half a mile behind me here on the media platform. 59 seats being decided across Scotland this evening. Here in Glasgow, there will be 7. 6 held last time round by the SNP, 1 by Labour. A record number of people in Scotland, just over 4 million, registered to vote in this election before the November the 26th deadline. The weather, I'm happy to say, has been kind to them. Voters have been spared the worst of a Scottish December. That's not to say there hasn't been disruption, mind you. There was a controlled explosion in North Lanarkshire of what's being described as a non-viable device outside a room that was going to be used by voters. They had to be diverted. A 48-year-old man has been charged in connection with that incident.
OK, James, let's go to Belfast. David Blevins is there. And David, tell us about the counts there.
Well, it's a different selection of parties for voters to choose from here in this corner of the United Kingdom, but that doesn't mean they are less relevant. There are 18 seats in Northern Ireland. Back in 2017, the DUP won 10 of them, Sinn Féin 7, and an independent candidate the 18th. Here in Belfast itself, the DUP is tonight defending 3 of the 4 seats, and Sinn Féin 1. So whether it's Fermanagh and South Tyrone, the most westerly constituency in the UK, or Antrim North, just 20 miles from Scotland on this side of the Irish Sea, we will bring you all the results from Northern Ireland as they come in, and we expect them all declared by about 3 o'clock.
OK, David, thanks for that. Katie Spencer is in Brighton tonight, where we'll see the Green Party's Caroline Lucas later. Katie.
Yeah, well, other counts are racing to be among the first to return a result. Sadly, I think that's not something you'll see us taking part in here at the Brighton Centre. We've got form for being a bit later, really, with the results when they come in. So you'll see that electoral juggernaut of hundreds of votes coming in between 3 and about 5. We're more likely to deliver a result sometime, we think, between 5 and about 7 in the morning. But they're all gearing up. They're all getting into place. It's 3 constituencies that we're counting for here. Hove, which in 2017 went to Labour, and I'll just step out of the way so you can see some of the other areas that we're going to be getting the count for. So over to the right, they're going to be counting for Brighton Kemp Town, which also went to Labour, and in the middle is where they're going to be doing the count for Caroline, what was Caroline Lucas's constituency in 2017, which gave the Green their only seat in the House of Commons.
Katie, thanks very much. Noel Phillips is in Kensington in West London, one of the London seats we're going to be watching very closely tonight, aren't we, Noel?
Indeed, Dermot. Welcome to Kensington and Chelsea Town Hall. And now, a short announcement a moment ago there, that's by the round of applause. Around 500 people employed here to ensure this election goes according to plan. And we were expecting results around 4:30 this morning. But beyond these walls, this is a constituency that is quite affluent. There are people here who live in deprived communities as well. But one of the most defining things about this constituency is the fact that it is a mile or so away from Kensington Palace, home to members of the royal family. And of course, we're expecting, as I've said, the results around 4:30 this morning.
OK, Noel, thanks for that. Let's go to Hartlepool. Gerard Tubb is live there, and it's, of course, where the chairman of the Brexit Party, Richard Tice, is standing, isn't it, Gerard?
We're going to have some excitement here, we're hoping, later on. Certainly a lot of people wanting to see what the result is going to be here. Of course, Hartlepool, North East Coast, between Middlesbrough and Newcastle, 71,000 voters here. It's people who are from this town, known as the monkey hangers, a 200-year-old insult from the Napoleonic Wars when they found a shipwrecked monkey on the beach. Thought it was a French spy. They'd never seen a monkey or a Frenchman, and so they hanged it. But it shows something of the spirit of the people here, that they're quite proud of that. Richard Tice, of course, as you say, wants to be the MP. Will this constituency that voted heavily for leave let him have his way?
OK, Gerard, thank you very much indeed. Now, Inzamam Rashid is in Walthamstow in North East London. And Inzamam, boxes arriving very soon.
That's right. Welcome to Walthamstow's Town Hall complex. There's going to be 3 counts here overnight, Dermot. We first got Walthamstow, then we've got Leighton and Wanstead, both Labour seats in the last general election, and then Chingford and Woodford Green. Now, that's probably the most noticeable one, with Ian Duncan-Smith, the former leader of the Conservative Party, standing in that constituency once again. He's been the MP for that constituency since it was first created 22 years ago, so no doubt we'll be seeing him in this hall tonight. Now, the voters, the counters are all there behind us, waiting for those ballot papers to come in and get counting after 10 p.m. It may be cliche to say, Dermot, but it looks like it's a kind of grab the popcorn kind of night here in Walthamstow.
Yeah, OK, could be, Inzamam. Thank you very much indeed. Well, the moment is fast approaching when the voting stops and we can bring you the results of the broadcaster's exit poll. Let's look at that countdown. Precisely now, 3 minutes, in fact, until we reveal the findings of this huge exercise carried out today by the pollsters Ipsos Mori on behalf of us here at Sky News, the BBC and ITV News. Canvassers have interviewed thousands of people in 144 different places across the country. Well, here with me is our political editor, Beth Rigby. So, as I say, well, under 3 minutes to go, Beth.
Under 3 minutes ago, and I'm so nervous about it, about this exit poll, because this is, as you said, the moment when you're not asking people how they intend to vote, how they did vote. And it's the first moment where we get a sense of how well or badly the parties have done. There's a margin, it comes up in seats won. There's a margin of error of 20 on either side. But certainly in the past 3 elections, it's been pretty on the money. It can change the narrative and it can surprise us.
Well, we will find out now. Looking at the clock again, let's count down to the 2-minute warning. 2 minutes to go until we can reveal the results of the exit poll. Who will return to Westminster with the mandate to form a government, or could voters deliver another hung parliament? We'll be getting that indication very soon. Your feelings, John Bercow?
It will be an exciting moment. It isn't absolutely proof positive of what will happen, but it's a pretty clear guiding light. So somebody's going to be very elated, and somebody is going to be very dejected.
You've been sitting at home, presumably, watching it in previous elections.
In previous elections, I've sometimes watched at home, but more often I have been out at dinner preparing to go to the count.
Indeed, of course. OK, John, thank you very much indeed for that. We are focusing on that clock again as it marches relentlessly towards 10 o'clock precisely. There's just over 1 minute to go now until we release the broadcaster's exit poll. Now, you don't know what it will say. We don't know what it will say. It's shocked politicians and the public on recent election nights, and despite their doubts, predicted the direction of the elections, certainly last time round in 2017, when it predicted that Theresa May would fall short. Well, will it do the same tonight? There are only moments left to wait. It's 10 o'clock. The Brexit election is over, And it looks like this. The exit poll is indicating it's a Conservative win, that the Conservatives will have 368 seats. The Labour Party, 191. The Liberal Democrats will gain 13. The Brexit Party on 0. Scottish National Party, 55. And the Greens on 1. Now, others will have 22. So there it is, the exit poll predicting a big Conservative win, a majority for Boris Johnson. Initial reactions, Beth Rigby.
Well, Boris Johnson called this the Brexit election, and really, if that is the result tonight, he has won emphatically an incredible result, if it's correct, and it means that we will leave the EU next year. Brexit will happen.
OK, well, there we are. The exit poll is indicating that the Conservatives will gain 368 seats. The Labour Party, 191. The Lib Dems, 13. That would be just one more since that they started the last Parliament with. The SNP will be on 55. Well, let's get reaction from John Bercow. A big majority, as Beth was saying there.
I think those figures spell an 86 majority, so if that's accurate, that is a phenomenal victory for the Conservative Party, and Boris Johnson would obviously feel completely vindicated in the gamble that he took. That is much more emphatic than some of the polls have suggested, but it would be an absolutely dramatic victory. And it certainly would mean, as Beth says, that he would be in a position to get phase 1 of Brexit done by the end of January. There's a much wider debate, but that is undoubtedly...
Well, let's just stay with that headline. It's an exit poll. No seats have declared, of course, yet, but that exit poll suggesting that Boris Johnson will have won, and won big, suggesting the Conservatives will have 368 seats. Jeremy Corbyn and Labour on 191. Well, one of those responsible for tonight's exit poll is Sky's election analyst, Professor Michael Thrasher. Now, he's tracked every election for us since Sky News was founded. He's now on his way here to the Sky Election Centre from central London. He was involved in compiling that exit poll. And, Michael, tell us more about it.
Well, it's been a remarkable day, Dermot. We've been taking interviews from across the country since 7 o'clock this morning, right the way through until just before the polling stations closed. And the Conservatives have been heading for an overall majority all day long. It's just that the number has fluctuated down as more Labour voters perhaps turned out to vote later on. But it really is a remarkable election victory for Boris Johnson, a majority of 86 seats. For Labour, it really is an appalling an election result, and possibly its worst performance in any general election since the Second World War. So Jeremy Corbyn, I'm afraid, will go down as one of the worst leaders in Labour's history.
And Michael, does it give us any indication yet of the areas to look out for where this will or may happen?
Very much so. It's quite clear that the more constituencies voted to leave the EU in 2016, the better the performance for the Conservatives. So the Conservatives are going to gain seats across the Midlands and Northern England. These are areas where traditionally Labour has held sway, and it's in these areas where the Labour vote has fallen most, the Conservative vote has risen the most. So it's in the former industrial towns of the Midlands and the North where Labour have really suffered, and they will lose many of the constituencies that they're going to lose, over 70. They will be lost in these areas.
And Michael, some discussion, of course, about the seats of some of the leaders, in particular Boris Johnson and Jo Swinson. Any thoughts about what might happen in those seats?
Well, in terms of Jo Swinson and Scotland, Scotland is fascinating in general because although you've got the Conservatives easily winning the most seats in England and Wales, in Scotland it is the SNP that prevail. We're suggesting that they are very close to their peak when they won 56 seats, we're suggesting that they're going to win 55. Some of those gains are from the Conservatives, some are from Labour, and some from the Liberal Democrats. In other words, all the parties that were in favour of remaining in Scotland remaining in the Union, they've all suffered defeats at the hands of the SNP.
OK, Michael, I know you're hot-footing it towards us here in the studio. See you very soon. Well, what do the Conservatives make of tonight's exit poll? The Tory party chairman, James Cleverly, is here with me now. Well, whatever the exit poll says, you always come in and say take it with a pinch of salt. Are you treating this one that way?
Well, I've always felt that polls should be taken with a degree of caution. We've seen over a number of electoral events over the last few years them call it wrong. I've been cautious of poll results when they've looked good. I'm cautious of poll results when they look not so good. So we'll see how the seats actually roll out before I start getting too excited about those numbers.
Indeed, but let's go with that indication. That would be a thumping majority, would it not, if it comes anywhere close to that?
Well, maths is maths, and if the numbers play out as per that exit poll, then that is numerically a big majority. But as I say, we'll want to see if it plays out, and also we'll want to see which particular constituencies have voted in what way.
But what about your sense of the way it was going on the campaign trail? I mean, an awful lot of Labour seats, according to the exit poll, will come your way, and presumably seats that have never been Conservative before. Did you get that sense while you were out campaigning?
Yeah. And it was difficult, really, to assess. It's still difficult to assess exactly how that feeling will play out. But I've spent much of this week, over the weekend, early part of this week, zigzagging across the Midlands and the north of England. And in long-standing Labour-held constituencies, there was fury. I mean, not anger, fury at both the Labour Party and at Jeremy Corbyn. A lot of people felt that they were lied to in 2017 when the Labour candidates looked them in the eye and said, I will deliver Brexit, and then spent the following 2.5 years doing everything to prevent it. But more than that, there was a feeling that the Labour Party had stopped talking about and talking to those communities and was focusing very, very much on basically its big urban constituencies.
And what about leadership? Do you think Boris Johnson just went down better than Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, Boris is very good at reaching out to people. I've been on the campaign trail with him a number of times. In 2008, when he won the London mayoralty against expectations. In 2012, when he won the London mayoralty against expectations. In the referendum, which was won against expectations. And we're seeing now, hopefully, if these numbers play out, that he has got the working majority that we've asked the British people to give us so we can get Brexit done and then focus on the priorities that I hear on the doorstep.
And there's Sunderland trying to be first. Let me bring in a man who you know very well, Mr Cleverly, former Speaker, John Bercow. And John Bercow, I mean, this would be, if it turns out this way, it's only the exit poll, this would be a majority of Thatcherite proportions.
Yes, I mean, it would be stratospherically higher than a lot of people, including quite a lot of Conservative optimists, had predicted. It's not quite in the domain of Margaret Thatcher's 101 in 87 and her 144 in 1983, but it is nevertheless a very, very, very satisfactory result for the Conservative Party, if that is what transpires.
It's the case. And Beth Rigby, it's the fourth time of asking as well to actually put on seats if this, we've got to keep saying it's the exit poll, but
this is
if
an
this
exit
actually
poll,
happens.
but let's just, I mean, a year ago, Boris Johnson was on the back benches and he almost looked, didn't he, James, like a busted flush. I mean, this is an incredible political comeback for Boris Johnson for a start. I mean, unbelievably impressive. If you think, if that is correct, if that poll is correct, he is the most successful Conservative Prime Minister since Margaret Thatcher. I mean, you haven't seen majorities like that for decades. And then the other thing I would say, in terms of Labour, if they have gone back in that sort of level, I mean, that's worse than the Michael Foot performance, then Jeremy Corbyn is going to have to resign. I mean, if that is correct, he has to resign. He can't stay on as leader.
Well, we'll be obviously putting those kind of questions to the Labour representative when they come in, but we've got James Cleverly from the Conservatives here right now. Are they popping any champagne corks, the old cliché yet, or are you just going to sit back and watch the results come in?
This is boring and it makes terrible television, and I apologise in advance.
Thank you.
We are going to wait for the numbers the real numbers, the real votes from real constituencies. Because until that happens, I mean, this may well be very well-informed speculation, but it is speculation. My job, the promise that I made to the Prime Minister, is to give him a working majority. That's what we're working towards, and if that comes off, then I'll be very pleased.
But back in 2015, when David Cameron eked a, 12-seat majority, it felt like a massive achievement. I mean, what has happened here, if that is correct? Are loads of Labour voters lending the Conservatives their vote because they want to get Brexit done, i.e., do you think that the Brexit identity of voters has completely trounced traditional party identities in this election?
I think that is part of it. That is part of it. But I think there's something deeper. I think for years, perhaps decades, there have been people who have voted Labour and they've seen the Labour Party drift further and further away from them, spend less and less time talking about the things that they value, spend less and less time talking about the parts of the country that they live in, and have knocked on the door and just expected those people to continue voting Labour. And I think the Brexit vote was a wake-up call because it was Labour's reaction to their vote that I think was toxic. So rather than saying, oh, my gosh, we've stopped listening to you, we'll listen to you now, we want to understand why you're upset, why you're angry, why you're fearful, we had senior voices from the Labour Party ridiculing those voters.
And is it going to change the Conservative Party if you have addressed different constituencies and attracted to them, they've attracted to your manifesto? Do you have to be a different party in a way?
Well, my contention is that under Boris's leadership, we are already becoming different. We are evolving, and I've always felt very proud of the Conservative Party because it's a party that evolves. And through his leadership campaign, Boris said that we need to spread opportunity around the whole of the UK, that we need to make sure that parts of the country that are not well connected in public transport terms get better connected, to raise the attainment of schools in parts of the country outside London, the South East. He was saying this during his leadership campaign. I think people have been listening to that, which is why we've seen, since the summer of this year, a steady increase in the support for the Conservative Party. Yes, in our traditional areas, like my lovely part of North Essex, but also where I was earlier on this week in Durham and in Newcastle and in Cumbria and in the West Midlands and in the North East and the North West and in North Wales.
Well, if this exit poll is to be believed, that's the kind of places, as you say, Mr Cleverly, you are going to start winning seats, but those results still to come in. Thank you very much indeed for the time being. We'll let you get off to your count, and we wanted reaction from the Labour Party. We've got Labour's Barry Gardiner joining us now, the Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade. Your mood, Mr Gardiner, what do you make of this, if it is to be 191 seats?
If that is the case, then obviously it's a devastating result for us. And not just for us. It's not just about our party or the people who've worked so hard to support the Labour Party. This is about all the people who were really needing a Labour victory to improve their lives in so many ways. The people who needed decent housing, the people who needed decent schools for their children that were properly funded, people in need of the health service or social care. And I think we offered a manifesto of hope, a manifesto that was full of integrity. And if this is the result, then many, many people are going to be very let down.
Are you questioning? You're not questioning the numbers then? You think, OK, it might not be 191, but even if it's 20 seats or so more, it's still awful, isn't it?
Look, it's not clear what it will be, but certainly this exit poll is a devastating blow. And obviously, as the night wears on, we'll know exactly whether it's as bad as it suggests or not. But it certainly doesn't look good. And I think, in one sense, we always knew that this election was going to be focused on Brexit, and that is the strategy that the Conservatives played. Most general elections are, of course, about all those other issues. This one has tended to focus almost exclusively on the issue of Brexit.
OK.
And that seems to have cut across the traditional lines of politics.
But if this is the number, it's catastrophic for Labour, is it not? Worst result since before the war, since 1935, in actual fact. Have you spoken to Jeremy Corbyn yet?
No, I haven't. Obviously, I rushed here to get to the studios, and I've been here since since 10 o'clock listening to the results. But obviously, it's a deeply depressing prediction, and as I say, it's one that really my heart goes out to all the people who had given their hope to the Labour Party, who really were relying on us to be able to improve their lives and sort out the problems that they were facing. And that's what pains me the most about a projection like this.
But that's the thing, though, Mr. Gardner, isn't it?
We will not have the ability to help them.
But that's the thing, you let them down. You know,
Oh, indeed.
well, you didn't offer them what they seemed to want, did you?
Well, I do believe that for many people, we were offering what they needed and wanted. I think, as I say, Brexit rather overlaid all of that. And of course, the Conservative manifesto is simply focused on Brexit. And, you know, OK, maybe a singular message was the one that has won through in the end. But it was a singularly lacking in vision offer from the Conservative Party. I'm proud that our offer was as strong as it is, was as hopeful as it is. And as I say, I am deeply, deeply depressed if these projections prove true.
Well, on these numbers,
we'll have let a lot of people down.
On these numbers, as you're touching on there, Mr. Gardner, you need to reinvent the party. And doesn't that start at the top? I mean, you need a new leader. You can't lose twice and lose the second time as badly as this.
Look, I mean, obviously these are things that will be discussed by the leadership of the party in the next few days. It's premature to be discussing them now. At the moment, we must see exactly what the night holds. And, you know, I hope that many of my colleagues will retain their seats, that the predictions will not prove true. Because I know every one of them has fought a campaign full of integrity, full of honesty, and full of compassion. And that's what is most to the fore of my mind at the moment, that we will not be able to deliver that compassionate, hopeful agenda for the people in our country who desperately needed it.
All right, Shadow Secretary of State, thank you very much indeed. Labour's Barry Gardner there. Well, let's see what those exit poll numbers mean for Parliament. Over to Ed Conway.
Well, I mean, blimey, Dermot, blimey. I mean, let's get the provisos out of the way first. You know, this is an exit poll. There are lots of question marks over, you know, it may not necessarily be fully reliable, but over the past few decades, it certainly has been. Let's have a look, though, at those numbers. Provisos out the way, 368 seats for the Conservatives. Not just a good night, a great night for the Tories. Boris Johnson could win 368 seats, would give them a majority in government quite clearly. Actually, have a look at how that actually works out. So there we have the numbers, but let's put them into our kind of virtual House of Commons. So there you have it. It's our government builder, essentially taking all of those parties, all of those results. This is from the exit poll. Let's put the Conservative numbers into the government benches, as it were. So those hexagons represent government benches. And that line, look at that line, that's 326 seats. It takes the Tories comfortably past the total they require to get into Downing Street. You'll remember that winning line we showed you earlier on, the line into Downing Street. According to the exit poll, Boris Johnson is safely in, but it is, of course, according to the exit poll. Now, the poll also suggesting maybe even more of a story, Labour to get 191 seats, leaving them short, obviously, of being able to form a coalition, challenge the Conservative Party. Historically bad, worse since the Second World War. As you were talking to Barry Gardner a moment ago. I mean, many people will think that's pretty disastrous for the Labour Party. Let's just go back, though. That's the exit poll. Let's go back and remember the picture in 2017, OK? So have a look at this. We'll show you the results last time around. So 2017, the Tories 318, short of that majority. There you can see the board on the left. Labour 262, so up above 200 that time around. And then you can see the map behind. That's the map as of before today. The map of the UK, the political map, is about to be redrawn. Let's clear that. It's clear. So we're starting afresh. And throughout the evening, that map's going to be very important because we're going to be keeping a very close eye on constituencies around the country. There you can see them dotted. So those constituencies around the country we're going to be looking at to see if that exit poll is on track or not. That's what we all want to know. An extraordinary number. Big reaction from markets as well, which we'll bring you in a second. But let's have a look. What we can do is not just give you the overall number, but some of the names that we might well focus on that might be part of the story tonight. Bolsover, Dennis Skinner. In 2017, the Tories managed to actually double their votes in Bolsover. It's 70% Leave voting area. The Tories have been very keen on getting that seat. Well, we can tell you that according to the exit poll, Bolsover is likely to fall to the Tories. So the Tories will win Bolsover, says the exit poll. Now, that is just what the exit poll is suggesting. We'll have to see whether the results actually bear that out, and we'll have earlier results that can kind of give you a sense of that. But that is what the exit poll suggests at the moment. Dennis Skinner's had that seat since 1950, an extraordinary moment for the Labour doyen there. There are other potential losses, actually, when you look at the north as well. So you've got Stoke-on-Trent, Labour since 1950, Wrexham, Lee as well, Labour since 1922. But have a look at this, OK? In London, City of London and Westminster. Could be better news here for Labour, what they've been targeting. And this really shows you, underlines the fact that we're not just talking about a uniform swing where it's all going to the Tories' way. There are some seats, actually, where Labour may well actually do well. Now, at the moment, this is the seat of Mark Field, who stood down at the election. It was a 9-point swing from the Tories to Labour in 2017. But get this, the exit poll suggesting it's not going to continue in this election. It could go to the Labour Party. So Chuck Umunna from the Liberal Democrats was hoping to win this seat. Now, according to the exit poll, again, provisos, we've got them out the way, that's going to go to Labour. Isn't that extraordinary? That was the seat that Chuck Umunna was hoping to win, but the exit poll suggesting that's looking good for Labour. We're not going to give you the exact numbers because I think that would be slightly spurious at this stage, but what we're telling you is that's what the exit poll is suggesting. Extraordinary results here. Elsewhere, have a look out in London for Putney, Wimbledon. They could also actually go to Labour as well. And now, obviously, the race is on. So we've cleared the board, and the race is now on for the first MP to be confirmed in Parliament. These are the contenders. You can see every year it's a race between Newcastle upon Tyne Central and Houghton and Sunderland South. There they are. Last time around, it was Chionwara in Newcastle upon Tyne Central who was announced first, shortly before her colleague Bridget Phillipson in Houghton and Sunderland South. The big question, of course, is who will it be this time around, Dermot? And will those results bear out what we've seen in that extraordinary exit poll?
OK, Ed, thank you very much indeed. Extraordinary is the word, if the exit poll is to be believed. Let's just talk you through those numbers again. 368, the indication for the Conservative Party. A huge majority for Boris Johnson. Labour pushed back under 200 on 191. Well, my colleague Sam Coates, our deputy political editor, is looking at so many historical comparisons being made. Sam, talk us through some of them.
So we've been looking under the bonnet of this extraordinary exit poll. And yes, it looks like Boris Johnson is on course to break a number of records if this exit poll does translate. Let's look first of all at some numbers we haven't seen yet. The approximate national share of the vote from our exit poll. This suggests that the Conservatives will end up on 46% of the vote and Labour could end up as low as 32%. Now, this would be a greater share for the Conservatives than in any election than 1970. It would also be the first time an incumbent government had increased its national share of the vote in 3 successive elections, 2015, 2017 and 2019. It looks as if there's been a swing from Labour to Conservative of 5.4%. The previous post-war record was Margaret Thatcher in 1979. That was 5.3%, so it looks as if Boris Johnson could be on course to beat that. Now, let's look at Labour. This looks like, if this exit poll is true, that the Labour Party could set a new post-war record for the smallest number of seats won by Labour in a general election. Look, in 1983, the party won just 209 seats with a 28% vote share. In 1987, they won 229, so clearly this exit poll puts them below that. Then you look at the fact that this is a Brexit election. The Conservative share of the vote has gone up in constituencies, particularly it's gone up in constituencies that had large Leave votes in 2016. But that's not the only effect in this election. It does appear as if there might have been something like a Corbyn effect, because Labour are down even in places they might have been expecting to do well. Even though Labour might pick up seats in London, Labour's vote has fallen everywhere, including London. It's just in decline less in London. And then there are just some extraordinary individual seats themselves. Lee, that seat formerly held by Andy Burnham, taking an enormous swing It's been Labour since 1922. That looks, under this exit poll, as if it could also be lost. One or two other quick things. The SNP, now they look like they're on course to almost repeat their triumph in 2015. They look like they're on course for 55 seats. In 2015, they got 26 seats. It could even come at the expense of Jo Swinson, the Liberal Democrat leader. It's an extraordinary exit poll pointing to an extraordinary night.
Could be quite a night ahead. OK, Sam, thanks for updating us on that from the exit poll. John Bercow, 368 seats for Boris Johnson. We've done the historical comparisons. Just give us your feelings, you know, what it might all mean.
Well, it would be a dramatic result, and it would be a vastly better result than most Conservatives dreamt of at any time during the campaign and probably for some months before. I would imagine the Prime Minister would be elated, thrilled to bits, dancing around the mulberry bush in joyous appreciation of the voters' verdict, if this is anywhere near to accurate. The only point I would like, Dermot, to pick up on from earlier is that James cleverly, quite understandably as the Tory party chairman, sought to superimpose his own view at a very formative stage of our proceedings on how the voters might have been motivated in voting as they did. And it was quite interesting that James said, well, it was much wider than Brexit. The Conservative Party had been focusing on transport and the extension of opportunity and enabling people to move forward and so on and so forth.
But you think it was Brexit? That core message, get Brexit done?
That really is a bit rich. The truth of the matter, and it isn't in any sense to cavil, it's just to clarify, it was a Brexit-focused, Brexit-orientated, Brexit-dominated campaign. The idea that there was any great push through for any other subject from the Conservatives is frankly fanciful. It was all about that message.
But the fact is, on that narrow point, then, Brexit does get done, i.e. the withdrawal agreement gets passed, if they have a majority of that side.
The withdrawal agreement, Dermot, is of the essence.
But that's
Phase one will be done, and it will be possible, I'm quite sure, if this result is true, for the UK to exit the European Union, as the Prime Minister wants, by the end of January 2020. But that's the withdrawal agreement. That is about the divorce bill, it's about the rights of European citizens, it's about the Irish border. I don't think, if I may say so, that means getting Brexit done in the sense that it's gift-wrapped or oven-ready for Christmas. We will be debating Brexit, certainly for the next 5 years, probably for the next 10, and conceivably for the next 15.
But the thing is, Beth Rigby, I mean, people just seem to want to stop talking about it, for the parliamentarians to stop arguing.
Yeah, and what I would say, though, John, about that majority, if he's got a majority that big, he is going to get Brexit done because he can actually push the terms of trade of what he wants to do through the Commons with a majority like that. He will not have the problems that Theresa May and Boris Johnson had in Parliament. The other thing that I think we should have a think about in this isn't just about Brexit. This could also be about the union. Because think about the SNP
Well,
vote.
the SNP
They've
prediction
put on,
55
according
seats.
to that, 55 seats, nearly back to the sort of performance that they saw back in 2015, I think it was, when they took nearly a clean sweep across Scotland. So you're going to have a very pro-Brexit Conservative Prime Minister pushing through what could be a very, very hard trade deal to get it done by the end of 2020. And you have Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland calling for a second referendum in a country
so it could be another
that
vote, actually. It could be a referendum.
Remains. So that is going to be a fascinating dynamic of a Boris Johnson
listen,
premiership.
plenty more to discuss and plenty of time to do it because we haven't had any results yet. But wonder if we've heard from the Prime Minister himself, from Boris Johnson. Well, my colleague Anna Botting is following Boris Johnson tonight. She's there in Uxbridge waiting for his count to complete. And have we heard anything at all from Mr Johnson, Anna?
Just in the last moment, in fact, he has tweeted his thanks to those who have worked hard in this campaign. The words of the Prime Minister then, thank you to everyone across our great country who voted, who volunteered, who stood as candidates. We live in the greatest democracy in the world. No tears in Downing Street this time. Remember Theresa May, the strategy back in 2017 was to go after those Labour leave-leaning seats. In the end, they took just 6. This time, it looks like that strategy has worked. And there is the Prime Minister out in South Ruislip earlier this evening, we understand. His own count here in Uxbridge, perhaps not looking quite such a pretty picture for the Prime Minister. Certainly, Labour here claimed that they have rattled the Prime Minister, suggesting that he's been here more times in the last week than they have in the last 4 years. But back to the overall picture then, what looks like a resounding victory for this politician who becomes more Marmite or less Marmite and more Heineken, the politician that can reach parts of the country that others can't. Well, let's go to Downing Street then. Our political correspondent, Kate McCann. And Kate, certainly the Conservatives would have been happy with less.
Yes, that's right, Anna. So the mood in Downing Street, where all of the Boris Johnson team, his top advisors, including Dominic Cummings, are here. They've been watching that poll together. It's still cautious, actually. They're still saying it's just an exit poll, but no doubt very, very pleased indeed, because this represents a really big change. We were talking earlier about what it would look like. It could mean the Conservatives winning seats like Darlington. That would be a 4 percentage point swing. That really is massive. And I have to say, we've travelled across the country, spent a lot of time in Midlands seats and in the north of the country, where lots of Labour voters have been saying to us, it's only anecdotally, but that for the first time they are going to be voting Conservative. Brexit is a huge part of that decision. I've just spoken to a Cabinet Minister in the last couple of moments. They are, of course, making the point that it's just a Brexit election poll so far, but they are saying that if this result is what the actual final result looks like, then they believe they could be taking seats like Cat Smith's in the north of the country. She has a 6,600 majority at the moment. The Conservatives would need over 6,000 votes to get that seat back. That really would be a big moment indeed. And there will be other seats like that where the Conservatives perhaps wouldn't even have dared to dream that they might be able to take it. This Cabinet Minister also said it's important that if the Conservatives do take those seats, that they hold on to them so they fulfil some of those promises that James Cleverly was just talking about there.
Kate, thank you. Suggestion that anything above 360 would count as a massive electoral realignment. Talk about massive swings in places like Dudley North, Don Valley, Workington, Bishop Auckland. And the big question now is, should this election be taken as an unquestionable mandate to Brexit? Is this the end of the road, really, for hopes of Remainers? And certainly we'll see that discussed and played out throughout the night. Dermot.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna. It's just after 10:30. You're watching the Brexit election on Sky News. Let me take you through the headlines. And counting has begun in the 2019 general election. The exit poll carried out for Sky News, the BBC and ITV News predicts a Conservative win with 368 seats, a majority of 86. The exit poll is also suggesting that Labour are set for a hugely disappointing night, with the party forecast to secure their lowest number of seats for many decades. And as you may have just heard, Boris Johnson has tweeted tonight saying, "Thank you to everyone across our great country who voted. We live in the greatest democracy in the world." He was out speaking to voters in Uxbridge tonight, just before the polls closed. Well, a very disappointing night indeed for the Labour Party. If that exit poll is correct, my colleague Sophie Ridge is tracking the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, tonight. What reaction from that camp, Sophie?
Well, the official reaction from Labour is that it's the very beginning of the night. Things are still too early to call when it comes to the result. But the reality, of course, is that they will have seen the exit poll just like the rest of us. The majority for the Conservative Party that's been predicted, and a very poor night for Labour if that comes through, down 71 seats. And speaking to someone in Team Corbyn, the kind of off-the-record remark is that they're shocked and sad. The mood is, of course, pretty low after seeing that exit poll result. And I think that despite the kind of official that this is just a poll, they have to wait for those results to come through, they will know just how bad this is for them at this early stage. We've also been talking to some former Labour MPs, current Labour candidates outside of London, because I feel like this is really turning into a race of two halves, if you like, a story of two halves for Labour tonight. That while the vote may be holding up well in places like Islington, outside of London, I'm told things like and Brexit cutting through. We'll go now to Jason Farrell, who's been tracking Jeremy Corbyn throughout the campaign, who's been following him tonight. Jason, what are you hearing?
Well, the official line from the Labour Party is that it's too early to say. As you say, they say their statement is it's only the very beginning of the night and it's too early to call the result. We, of course, knew this was going to be a challenging election with Brexit at the forefront of many people's minds and our country increasingly polarised. It says, but Labour has changed the debate in British politics. We've put the public ownership, the green industrial revolution, an end to austerity centre stage, and introduced new ideas such as plans for free broadband, free personal care. The Tories only offered more of the same. Perhaps that's part of the problem, really, that there were so many different things in that list that didn't have that defined central message that the Conservatives had. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of soul-searching over this. You know, was it the lack of a definitive message? Was it anti-Semitism? Did that play a part and the difficulty that the leader had to deal with that? Was it their failure to really offer a cohesive message on Brexit? All these things, actually, if you think about it, just in the last week of the campaign, were things that the Shadow Health Secretary John Ashworth pointed out in that unguarded conversation. They said they were having problems on the doorstep. He said it was dire. I mean, he said he was joking when that was leaked, but he wasn't joking. It was clearly that was the problem that they were having, A, with the leader, B, with this issue around Brexit, and there'll be a lot of questions being asked tonight.
Jason Farrell there, live for us in North London. Sophie Ridge there as well. Thank you both very much indeed. Much more from them coming up. We're hoping to talk to the SNP in a moment or two and John Bercow, because we're focusing down on that result. We've been looking, of course, the prediction in the exit poll. The suggestion, the Scottish National Party could get 55 seats. That would be a huge result if it turns out that way. And as Beth was saying, do you think that would bolster the case for another independence referendum?
It means that the argument won't go away. They will press it with relentless force and insistence. And who can blame them? On the back of a result, if this plays out, that is far better than most people anticipated. I mean, it's a superb result. If they get 55 seats, only one fewer than in 2015. That's vastly superior to what everybody was expecting. People were saying 45, 46.
But there's an almighty row then in prospect, isn't there, between Westminster and Holyrood? If this is the result, then Boris Johnson's very clear. He's not going to let them have another referendum, and Westminster has to legislate.
Well, it will be a case of the irresistible force meeting the immovable object, Dermot. That's not a first in United Kingdom politics, but you're quite right. I mean, Boris Johnson has been absolutely clear. The Conservatives have no intention of allowing another referendum on independence, and equally, Nicola Sturgeon has been resolute and insistent that that is the right of the people of Scotland. So
let's hear
55 would be very impressive.
Well, let's see the interpretation of the SNP themselves then. Humza Yousaf joins me now from Glasgow. First of all, overall reaction to these numbers. If it does turn out to be the case, 55 seats for the SNP, that would be a very good result.
Well, look, it points to a very good night for the SNP, but let's state the obvious. This is an exit poll, not a result. What I would say also, in Scotland, we have so many marginal seats. Some seats, of course, we won in 2017 with only 2 votes. Some held by our opposition by only a few tens of votes as well. So there's lots of local factors at play here. What I would say also is that it's extraordinarily disheartening to see a Conservative majority. It clearly shows that if the exit poll is true, that Labour's message in the rest of the UK clearly hasn't cut through at all.
Well, answer that point I was putting to John Bercow for me from your perspective. How do you square that circle? If Boris Johnson and the Conservatives are returned with this huge majority, we've heard all along what Boris Johnson has said about the prospect of another independence referendum in Scotland. Well, he's just basically said, frankly, he said, no, it's not going to happen. How do you get round that?
Well, very simply, if your exit poll is true, but actually, in fact, if any of the polls that we've seen over the recent months are true, they point to the SNP winning the election in Scotland. And our message could not have been clearer. We stood on a very clear mandate to stop Brexit, to let Scotland have its own say, and to lock Boris out of number 10. So independence was very much at the front and centre of our campaign. Boris Johnson, any UK government, if they're Democrats, cannot deny the voice of the Scottish people. It is not for Boris Johnson to dictate when there's another independence referendum. That is a choice for the Scottish people.
and the Scottish Parliament.
But I mean, that's the moral authority, the political authority you would claim if that is the result. But what about the political reality? That Westminster has to allow a referendum to take place.
Well, as I say, as I keep saying, I don't think it's in the gift of the Westminster Prime Minister, of the Westminster Parliament, to dictate to Scotland when they should have another referendum, particularly if the SNP, as it looks like, not just from exit polling, but from all the polls that we've seen thus far, are likely to have a good night and likely to be the winners in Scotland. So, of course, we'll have to have that discussion. The First Minister has made it clear that she will write to the Prime Minister to demand that Section 30 order. It would not be, I think, at all democratic for a Westminster government, be it Boris Johnson or anybody else, to deny us that mandate.
But I say, you'll have the numbers, Boris Johnson will have the numbers, and we've got these positions, you're entrenched, but something has to give. How does it give? Is it just you making those arguments, or could it go beyond that?
Well, listen, at the moment, as we say, and the First Minister could not have been clearer around this. In 2014, we had the gold standard referendum. We had an agreement between two governments, Scottish, UK government, that were diametrically opposed to their opinion on independence, but came together to find a legal route towards that referendum. We want that gold standard applied for the next referendum in 2020, and if ASNP win, then of course nobody can deny that that gives us a further mandate. We already have a mandate, but a further mandate for another referendum in 2020.
OK, Humza Yousaf, thank you very much indeed. If that all happens, a battle of wills, as John Bercow has been saying beside me, perhaps in prospect between Edinburgh and London. Well, listen, while we're digesting this exit poll, no results, of course, have come in yet. At election night, counts right across the country. They are gathering in and counting those votes, and some of them counting them as quickly as they possibly can, as ever. We'll be watching two places especially closely in the early parts of this evening. And these are the two cities, we've been reporting on them earlier, racing to be first, Newcastle and Sunderland. They vie to be the first to declare. Their fingers are blur there, and those are the people who'll tell us who's going to win the race. Gillian Joseph and Sarah Jane Mee. Let's go to Gillian first. And how is it going there, Gillian?
Hi, Dermot. Well, a lot busier than when we last spoke, a lot noisier. The counting is going ahead at a pace. This, of course, is a multi-count constituency. We're looking at the constituencies of Newcastle Central, East and North. And I can see one of the candidates for Newcastle Central, Chi Wawura. We can just zoom in on her there in the red dress. She retained the seat in 2017, had a majority of 24,071 votes, and she saw her share increase from 55% at the 2015 election to 65% in 2017. She is the first black MP for Newcastle. Her mum's from Newcastle and father from Nigeria, studied here as a dental student, and that's how her parents met. So took the seat in 2017. We also have Nick Brown. Saw him a little earlier on, not entirely sure where he is now. He's been a Member of Parliament for Newcastle upon Tyne East since 1983, and he served as Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food, and also is currently the Chief Whip. We also have the other Labour candidate took the seat in 2017, Catherine McKinnell. Still on course, Newcastle say, to get that result in sometime just after 11. So hopefully we'll be back to you then, and they will have retained the crown for being the fastest to declare. We shall see.
Well, I bet, thanks, Gillian, I bet Sunderland are thinking very differently. Let's go to Sarah Jane Mee there. And how far away do they think they are there in Sunderland, Sarah Jane?
Of course they are thinking very differently. Here is going well. All 121 boxes from the three constituencies are in the building and being counted. It's a real hive of activities. You probably saw on your screen a little earlier those sixth formers, boys and girls, running up and down in their sports kits, in their trainers. They've got white gloves on as well because it's wet outside, so they didn't want to drop any of those boxes. But all those boxes, all 121, are now in the building and being counted. We spoke to the returning officer, Patrick Melia, a little bit earlier on, and he said that he predicted the first boxes would arrive in this building at 10:03. I can hang on. The first box came in dead on 10:03. They've got a bit of an advantage. The sports hall we're standing in is at the heart of the Horton and Sunderland South constituency, so that's a big advantage. Remember, the record to declare here for Horton and Sunderland South is 10:48. Patrick Melia, though, and his team are saying that they're expecting the first result a little after 11 p.m. Perhaps playing down expectations, but they're keen to stress that being accurate is more important than being first. But Dermot, I can tell you, we've got a bit of inside information. We're hearing rumours on social media and elsewhere that there could be a third horse in this North-East derby. Blythe Valley, that count going on there, they are very confident that they may be the first to declare tonight. So we're predicting it around 11 p.m. to have the first result here, so stay with us for that. But keep an eye out for Blythe Valley as well.
Thanks for the tip, Sarah Jane. Blythe Valley coming up on the outside. Back with you both very soon, Sarah Jane, Gillian. Thank you very much indeed. Well, listen now, this exit poll predicting a huge majority for the Conservatives, suggesting that might happen. The financial markets have been tracking Brexit, all the ups and downs during the course of the last year, and in particular what's going on the money markets. Let's talk to Ed Conway about that. How's the pound reacting?
Yeah, well, I mean, in a sense, there are kind of two polls happening today, aren't there? We've got the election, but then you've got the market reaction to it. And, you know, we all remember what happened after the last election. You know, that big surprise on the exit poll, the pound fell very sharply. Remember what happened on Brexit Day? So on the EU referendum, the pound fell very sharply. Come and have a look at what's happened to the pound in the wake of that exit poll. So here we've got a chart of it. This is the pound versus the dollar. So that's stronger, that's weaker. The pound being stronger, the pound being weaker. And this is the start of election day. And over the course of the start of the day, it was kind of trending a little bit lower. I think there were traders out there who were a bit nervous about the result, and it kind of went down from about 132, that's around there, to where it is there. So just getting down to about 131. But just look at this. Look at what happened when the exit poll was announced. The pound skyrocketed. It absolutely took off and is up by about 3 cents to 135. It's actually gone up a little bit since I made that chart. It is climbing very sharply indeed. You know, this is a big surprise, as we all knew. No one was expecting quite as big a majority as that. A lot of people thought there might well even be a hung poll, and that might be why people were starting to sell off the pound there. But, you know, this is a barometer for how investors around the world are looking at the UK. You know, often when the pound goes up, it's because people are putting money into the country. When it goes down, it's because they're taking it out. Well, it looks like people might be putting money into the UK. It looks like they've seen this exit poll result and want to invest in the UK. And, you know, we can speculate about why that might be. They might like the possibility of there being more stability when it comes to the Brexit negotiations. There might be other things as well. But nonetheless, I mean, that's a pretty extraordinary chart. You know, the pound reacting very sharply. You know, there'll be more reactions if indeed that result is borne out, or indeed if it's not right. But just consider that, you know, and very different indeed to those results that we had after the referendum and after the last election where it fell. It is skyrocketing right now, Dan.
That is fascinating, Ed. Thank you very much indeed. Let's talk more about this exit poll. And Beth Rigby, well, on the exit poll, two winners, big winners tonight, the Conservatives and the Scottish National Party, two big losers. The Labour Party, we've discussed them, we'll obviously go back to that, but the Liberal Democrats,
we haven't discussed
this exit poll saying 13. Now, they had 12 at the start of the last Parliament. That would be a gain of 1 seat.
Yes, and this was a party, you remember, did so well in the European elections, positioned itself as a Remainer party, thought it could eat in to the Labour vote. Jo Swinson going into this election, she was the one that facilitated the election. Actually, Labour didn't really want it much, but it was Jo Swinson teaming up with the SNP that got this December election over the line in the first place. And she went into it saying, I could even be Prime Minister, and she's come out the other end, potentially.
Well, there's a question mark about whether she'll stay being an MP.
And that's the other
exit poll telling us East Dunbartonshire, her seat. There's some pressure on.
Exactly. There's 4 seats in Scotland that, on that exit poll, haven't been won by the SNP. Now, 12 of those were Conservative seats. She has won her seat back in 2017. She lost it in 2015. Could she have lost her seat? Don't know yet. I have to say, though, if she has held on to her seat, she was asked a number of times, if you really fail to perform in this election, as that looks like, will you resign? And she said, no, I'm not going to stand down.
I mean, what do you make of that, of the campaign strategy? You know, if this is the case, it's a repudiation of that. Do you think people John Bercow just kind of thought it was going too far to say, well, outright revoke Article 50 without another referendum?
The short answer to that, Dermot, is yes. I think there have been two problems with the Liberal Democrat campaign. First, it was a strategic error to say we will revoke Article 50. The Lib Dems could perfectly well have stuck to their existing line that they would go for a second referendum. They chose to be a bit more ambitious and to proceed beyond that, and I think that gamble has backfired. That's the first point. And I think the second point, really, is that they have just been subject to the classic two-party squeeze. The Conservatives and Labour have dominated, and people have thought in the end, that really is the choice. Do you go Conservative or do you go Labour? And under our existing electoral system, with thinly spread Lib Dem support, it's very difficult
and that was the thing,
to get many seats.
The squeeze, Beth, I mean, this was a feature, wasn't it, the developing campaign?
There was the squeeze, but also, if you look back to 2010 and Cleggmania, and the way in which a Lib Dem leader managed to kind of capture some sort of national mood, I think it's fair to say that Jo Swinson surprised on the downside in this election, that unfortunately for her, the more the public saw of her, the less they liked her. I mean, how do you think of her as a performer in the Commons?
I mean, I think that's a really interesting point, because in sum, you're right, Beth, Nick Clegg did catch the attention and the imagination and the support of very large numbers of voters in 2010, and Jo Swinson clearly hasn't done. In the Commons, in my experience from the rather good vantage point of the chair, Jo Swinson is an outstandingly good performer. She's clear, she's strong, she's articulate, and as an individual, both in a group and one-to-one, she's very personable. But it was quite striking in this election that, according to the polling evidence, the more people saw her or heard her, the less they liked her. Now, I'm not saying that's fair. In fact, I don't think it is fair. I think she's an extremely good person, but she's fared badly in this election. OK. Not just in terms of her party, but personally.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about the Lib Dems. Lord Newby is here from the Liberal Democrats. Going to talk to you in just a moment or two, Lord Newby. Just want to alert everyone to the fact that we are waiting for results from this race between Sunderland and Newcastle to be the first to declare in this general election of 2019, although we hear whispers that perhaps Blythe Valley is coming up on the outside of that. So we'll bring you those first results as and when they come in a few minutes' time, we expect. Lord Newby, you overreached in this campaign, if this exit poll is to be believed.
I don't think we overreached. We haven't done as well as we thought.
Jo Swinson could be Prime Minister. That's how you kicked it off.
When we started the election, you'll recall that there were four parties more or less in the 20s. In fact, they were in the 20s. What happened is that Boris, very cleverly, expropriated the Brexit Party by moving to an extreme Brexit position. So they collapsed to nothing. We then found ourselves with two issues on the doorstep. One was Brexit, and Boris got all of those votes. The Tory vote share is almost exactly...
I'm confused, Lord Newby, though, because Brexit didn't come out of a clear blue sky, though. You make it sound like you were blindsided.
No.
You formulated that policy of revoke carefully. You crafted it over many months.
But the second point was that the fear of Jeremy Corbyn was such that when you talked to many, many, many Conservatives and said, you are in favour of Remain, why will you vote for the Liberal Democrats? They said, and I've been on thousands of doorsteps, they said, we'd love to vote for you, but actually our fear of Corbyn trumps our support for Remain. And that is what dealt us a very, very big blow.
OK, that's the overall analysis. I mean, if these numbers are to be believed, 13 seats. You started the last Parliament with 12. That would be a major, major disappointment. Your overall reaction?
Well, our vote share will have gone up. The number of seats will have gone up. Our view at the moment is that the position in Scotland, for us at least, is rather better than the poll suggests. Like everybody, we want a lot more votes and a lot more seats. We're going to get some more votes and some more seats at a time when the other party that's been arguing on a Remain platform has completely collapsed. We have not completely collapsed. We've moved forward not as much as we'd wanted, by a very long way.
one seat. You ended the Parliament with, what, 20?
I'm not accepting for a minute.
Of course you're not.
With 13 seats.
But tell me more about what you're hearing from Scotland then, because, you know, that exit poll suggesting that the leader, Jo Swinson, may be in a bit of bother.
Well, all I'm hearing from Scotland is that the reaction we found on the doorstep suggests that that exit poll is rather over-optimistic for the SNP. I don't have any absolutely detailed figures from anywhere in Scotland, but that's what my Scottish colleagues are telling me.
OK, and tell me more about this Brexit strategy. You talked there about how the Conservatives squeezed the Brexit Party vote. Well, you know, people saying who wanted Remain, who certainly wanted another referendum, why didn't you get your act together with the Labour Party? You're going to see so many seats this evening with Lib Dem and Labour candidates getting thousands of votes and the Conservatives sailing down the middle.
Well, it was impossible for us, in advance of the election, to reach an agreement with the Labour Party, because what was their Brexit policy? I mean, it was all over the place.
Ultimately, it was a referendum.
It was renegotiate and no commitment
but isn't it
to
true?
what the leadership
isn't it true,
would do.
though, partly, that because the Lib Dems and because Jo Swinson went so aggressively up against Labour, if it was framed as a Brexit election, which it seems to have been, that actually, by going up against Labour, you split the Remain vote and you let the Conservatives through the middle, and Boris Johnson's been rewarded with a very, very big majority that's going to get a much harder Brexit, potentially, than the Lib Dems would have wanted. So wouldn't it have, in hindsight, made it be better to have had a Remain alliance that was broader than just the smaller parties?
Well, there was no prospects of a Remain alliance, partly because the Labour Party policy on Brexit was very unclear.
But did you try? Did you approach Labour?
There were lots of discussions with Labour in the run-up to the election about Brexit and about other things, and it was absolutely 1,000% clear that there was no deal to be done. And secondly, we have made it clear in the election that we could not support Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister because of his support or his...
Well, that's a problem that's, according to the exit poll, that's a problem that's long in the past. John Bercow, I mean, Lord Newby describing there this two-party squeeze that you've been describing, and Brexit seems to have been the vice that Boris Johnson has used to squeeze them.
Well, I think the Lib Dems have suffered from that, and I don't cavilate much of what Dick has said. And, of course, he's perfectly entitled to make the point that it's early days and we don't know whether the Lib Dems will do quite as badly as has been foreshadowed. But it is a huge problem for them that they went that much further on Brexit than they'd previously gone. And I think there is something of an acknowledgement amongst some Liberal Democrats that that was a strategic error. They could perfectly well have stuck with the position to which they'd long been committed. Second referendum, second referendum, second referendum, people's vote, people's vote, people's vote. Give the people the final say. There was a sense, Dick, I think, that going into an election and saying, we will revoke Article 50, had a ring of the anti-democratic about it, at which a lot of people took umbrage.
I think the majority of people took umbrage were the people who were already having taken umbrage with this. The interesting thing from the polling shows that amongst Remain voters, revoke was extremely popular. Remember, there were over 6 million people signed a petition for revoke, and amongst Labour Remainers, the revoke policy was more popular than Labour's own policy. So revoke was raised a lot, but in my experience, it was largely raised by people who weren't going to vote for us anyway, and it was just an additional stick that they saw to beat us with.
And so what happens now if Brexit is so-called getting done by the Conservatives? Then the battle moves on to what kind of Brexit it is.
That's right.
It's this trade deal that has to be negotiated on the Conservative timetable, on Boris Johnson's timetable, by the end of the year. Now, a lot of observers saying, and including we're hearing from the European Union, that would have to be a hard Brexit then. How do you fight against that?
Well, Boris says a lot of things, and he tends not to stick to what he's said. So he said that we've got to get the trade deal done by the end of the year. It won't be done by the end of the year, so he will have a choice, a difficult choice. Either we crash out without a deal at the end of the year, or you extend the period during which we remain, in effect, members of the EU in terms of following the rules. Now, if I were a betting man, which I'm not, I would say that Boris may just change his view faced with the fact that there is zero chance of getting an acceptable trade deal by the end of the year.
Dick, it seems to me that that's a very reasonable point. Leaders with large majorities have the luxury of choice.
Yes.
And it's perfectly conceivable that Boris Johnson could jump in one or other of two directions. He could stick to that position of saying, end of the year, come hell or high water, we will leave, and whatever the deal is, we're out, in which case it could well be on WTO, extremely hard Brexit terms, or he could, blessed from his point of view, with a munificent majority, say, well, actually, I'm going to need a bit longer. And in reality, although there will be a hard core of people rejecting, he'll just persist with it.
And on that, John, so would it be saying, well, ERG, I don't need you. European Research Group, you gave Theresa May so much trouble, but, you know, you're tiny now compared to this majority.
This is so interesting, isn't it? Because Boris Johnson predicated and built his base within the Conservative Party and went on to win the leadership on the back of ERG support of the Brexiteers, and that, in turn, developed this quite hardline Brexit position. But, you know, he went into this election and all through the campaign was saying, come on, you're not going to be able to get your trade deal done by the end of 2020, so I will absolutely be able to get it done. And, you know, why did he want to do that? Because he needed to win the Brexiteers. He might change his mind.
Thank you very much, Beth. You are watching the Brexit election on Sky News. It is 11 o'clock. Let me take you through the headlines so far. And the exit poll for Sky News, the BBC and ITV News predicts the Conservatives are on course for a decisive win with 368 seats, a majority of 86. The exit poll also suggests that Labour will secure around 191 seats. That is their lowest number, would be their lowest number of seats for many decades. And the Shadow International Trade Secretary Barry Gardiner has told Sky News that if that exit poll is correct, it will be devastating. And Boris Johnson was out speaking to voters in Uxbridge tonight just before the polls closed. The pound surged 2% after that exit poll. And in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon has tweeted that it's a good night for the Scottish National Party. The exit poll is predicting that the SNP will get around 55 seats. Well, the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, is in Westminster tonight and joins me now. What do you make of the exit poll, John McDonnell?
Well, if the seat tally comes out that way, it's going to be extremely disappointing. Of course it is. I'm not sure if the seat tally will shadow completely the exit poll itself, but even if it's anywhere near that, yes, it is. It's really extremely disappointing.
OK, and why is it disappointing? I want to put to you something your colleague Barry Gardiner said to me earlier. He said that he felt sorry for the voters, that they'd been let down. This is democracy. The voters have a clear choice, and on that exit poll, they've decided they don't like the Labour Party very much and they want to go with Boris Johnson.
I think the poll itself, it looks as though it was the Brexit dominated. A lot of this, I think, was Brexit fatigue. People just wanted it over and done with. And it put Labour in a very difficult position because the vast bulk of our members supported and campaigned for Remain, but a large number of Labour MPs, including myself, had constituencies that voted Leave. So it was always going to be difficult for us to straddle those positions, and that's what's hit us pretty hard. But I think basically it looks as though all other debate on other issues seems to have been squeezed out by this one issue, Brexit. And as I say, it wasn't just Leavers, I think also even people who in the referendum might have voted Remain.
But that's my point.
Let's get it over the way.
Mr. McDonnell, I mean, why feel sorry for the voters? I'm sure you will be very familiar with the term false consciousness. You know, people took a decision here not to vote for you and, yes, get Brexit done, and they voted for the Conservative Party. Why feel sorry for them?
Because although they might have voted to get Brexit done, it doesn't look as though it will get done. I think it will go on for a number of years, and there are still those risks of no-deal Brexit on the table as well. So it sounded simple as a slogan, but in practice and reality, it's going to take quite a while before anything does get resolved. That's the first thing. And I fear also during that period we'll have continuing uncertainty, and I also fear that the sort of deal that might well be arrived at the end will not be beneficial for the economy or protect jobs and living standards. So that's one issue. But also, it is about installing what is, I think, is generally seen as possibly the most right-wing extreme cabinet that we've seen in our history. And it means, therefore, they will have, if they have a large majority like this, they will have then, therefore, the opportunity to introduce some quite reactionary policies. And so there are worries, but if the electorate have decided this way, that's democracy.
Indeed.
And you have to respect it. But I don't think...
you're accepting that.
I don't think it will bring the country together. I think it'll be deeply divided still.
Have you spoken to the leader? Do you think he should stay leader?
Well, obviously, we'll wait and see what happens in the morning with all the results coming out, and we'll see whether the results actually do match the exit poll itself. Exit polls have been wrong in the past, but we'll see. And then appropriate decisions will be made, I'm sure.
But you know, you've been on the campaign trail for many weeks now. You've been up and down the country. You must be bracing yourself to say goodbye to quite a few colleagues tonight.
If the exit poll is right and we lose that many colleagues, I feel for them. I really do, because I know how hard they've worked in Parliament in the interests of the country, and I also know how hard they've worked in their own individual constituencies. And if it is anything on this scale, we will have lost some really good MPs, and I do feel for them, of course I do.
And if, Mr Corbyn, you say you're going to wait for the results to come in, but if he does go, you need a new leader. You've been talked of as an interim one.
Well, decisions will be made appropriately in the right time scale once we know the results, I'm sure. But let me make it clear, I'm not standing for leader of the Labour Party. I've said that time and time again, either as a temporary or as a permanent. That's not what I want to do.
But what about you? What about you personally? Even as Shadow Chancellor, you said in a magazine interview, you said you would stand down if you lost this badly.
No, well, as I say, once we know the results themselves, that's the time to make decisions, and that's what we'll do. In the meantime, let's watch these results, and I'm hoping that the seat share will not be as dramatically bad as the poll itself, and I don't think they will, but as I say, it's...
OK, Shadow Chancellor, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Maybe catch up with you when those results do come in. This is the exit poll I want to talk you through again that I was discussing there with John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, looking very, very bad indeed. An indication from this exit poll, talked to thousands of people who had voted up and down the country during the course of the day, saying that Labour might get 191 seats. That would be its lowest number of seats since 1935, underperforming even Michael Foot in 1983. The Conservatives, you can see there. Let's just bring it back up so we can absorb that. I was talking about Labour because we've just been talking to John McDonnell, but I just want to show you what the exit poll is saying that the Conservatives might get. We don't seem to be able to bring it to you, but you can see it at the bottom of your screen. 368, a majority of 86, and that's the introduction to the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, who's joined me now. You're looking calm, but underneath it there, bit of a smile. I mean, you must be smiling in Conservative HQ tonight.
Well, I think, look, it's an exit poll. We'll wait and see what the...
Been pretty accurate in the past.
I'm not going to push back too violently with you. But, look, the reality is let's see both the scale but also the shape of what any majority would look like. The most important thing for us is that we wanted to end the uncertainty of Parliament, get a functioning, workable majority so that the government can take the country forward on Brexit, but also on the other areas that would unleash the potential of the country on...
I'm going to ask you about that in a moment. Yeah, you know,
police, the NHS...
The priorities.
And I think that positive message and the choice between that and the uncertainty and the paralysis, and frankly, the negative
well, we don't
message...
want to rerun the campaign.
Well, OK, but that's what it feels like.
We do want to talk what happens next if this is the case. But just on that exit poll, you be aware, you are the candidate, of course, in your own seat, Isha and Walton. It's been a concerted campaign to get you out. It's a Remain voting seats. What are you hearing? What are you feeling?
Well, look, we'll wait and see.
Well, the exit poll says you might be OK.
It says we might be OK. And that's our feeling too. But let's wait and see. I always think if you've been campaigning for 5 weeks, show the electorate a bit of respect and have some humility as a candidate. But right the way throughout, there's been a pretty positive feedback for us. So we're feeling...
You've been very frank with us tonight. I mean, were you worried at times during the campaign? You read the papers, you read your own polling. I mean, they must have got pretty close.
Well, we'll see.
But were you worried during the campaign?
So, not really. And I'll tell you why. There's two debates and two theatres for most general elections. There's the media theatre and the punditry and social media and all that, and then there's the steady feedback you get, the quiet moments with swing voters on the doorsteps. Now, I may be proved wrong, but we felt pretty confident about the positive feedback for our positive.
And I know you're up and down the country. Were you surprised then in other parts of the United Kingdom, particularly in England, where there'd never been Conservative MPs, and not for many, many decades? Were you surprised at some of the reactions you were getting, some of the feedback you were getting, particularly from Labour voters?
So it's very striking. I was up in Wolverhampton, I was up in Warrington, and we're clearly getting a hearing in homes across the country that we hadn't done for some time. And part of that was about Brexit. Part of it was, I think, the sense of positivity that the Prime Minister and the Conservatives have offered. I think we've got some great candidates across the country. And let's face it, part of it is about wanting to break through the uncertainty and a lot of those working-class voters not liking the offer from Corbyn.
Oh, and that is the very point. How do you serve them now as a Conservative government? How do you serve them personally, representing, if it does turn out to be the case, Leafy, Esher and Walton, which is high up the economic scale? How do you serve these different voters who have lent you, perhaps for the time being, their vote and, you know, want to be convinced that they should stay with you? How do you do that?
So there's two things. I think, assuming the exit poll is corroborated by the seat-by-seat vote share, then, look, having an alliance between the aspirational working and middle classes is the glue that I think shapes Tory victories in election campaigns. Now, you mentioned my seat compared to, say, Warrington or Wolverhampton. Actually, although there are very affluent parts of my constituency, I was out tonight in Lower Green, one of the less affluent areas. And I was interested, and of course it's for different reasons, but actually in many seats you will have, obviously to more or less degrees, that mix of voters. So, but what's really important for the Conservatives, I think, is to make sure we cement that alliance and deliver, because that's what they want to hear.
Let's bring in a man you know very well indeed, crossed swords with him. I don't know if you heard the lash of his tongue while he was presiding over you.
I was pretty well behaved, wasn't I, John?
Was he pretty well behaved?
Dominic was extremely well behaved.
Okay,
he was unfailingly courteous, certainly to the chair and, frankly, to the House. I think there was one cock-up on one occasion when some statement wasn't ready on time. That was rather embarrassing. It wasn't his personal fault, though he had to take responsibility. But no, Dominic was always unfairly
OK, well, there's his report card, Mark. But let's talk about the serious stuff, because, John, you've been making this point throughout the evening, that this idea of getting Brexit done, and the Foreign Secretary referring to that there, get it done and then move on. You were saying, well, you don't really move on because it's only with the withdrawal agreement.
Yes, that's my point. Look, I'm not knocking the central proposition here that if the Conservatives have got a big victory, they will get the first part of Brexit done in pretty short order. That is not in dispute. I'm not arguing that. What I'm saying is that there are certain facts that don't change, and those include the need to negotiate a trade arrangement with the European Union and the need to negotiate trade arrangements with the United States and the rest of the world. That's before you even consider the security partnership, the fight against climate change, the action of a collaborative kind that is needed to tackle the phenomenon of human trafficking, and a vast miscellany of other issues too. Those will take time, and they don't depend only on the view of the British government. They depend on what other countries think as well, and that will take years. That's the only point I'm making. It'll take years.
But it's a very, very important point if you want to move on. If you get mired then in these negotiations with the European Union, Michel Barnier saying the other day, 11 months, not a chance. You know, we looked at the renegotiation, for instance, of the NAFTA deal. United States, Mexico and Canada. I mean, it's a much looser arrangement. It's taken them 3 years to do that. And can you really do it in 11 months?
So I think there's two or three things there. First of all, one of the reasons that it took so long to negotiate the original Brexit deal was because we had our own Parliament. If we've got the kind of majority that's suggested, this will very much strengthen and reinforce our position in phase two. But also, we've now got the future relationship, at least a map of it, in the form of the political... Hold on.
It's a wish list, isn't it, the political declaration?
No, it's the political declarations is equivalent for lawyers with the heads of terms, agreed with the other side. And Phil Hogan, the Trade Commissioner, has said that it's eminently doable. And I think it's very interesting, the mood coming out of Brussels this evening, which is actually a clear direction of travel, and that will make it easier for them because they'll feel like they've got a partner which is a bit more predictable. And now that's certainly going to be true if these figures are borne out.
But the truth is, isn't it, Mr. Raab, that if you want to and you get that bigger majority, you have got the latitude to delay Brexit, extend the transition if you need to, because if you do want to have a 5-year term in which you do appeal to this much broader electorate, you probably need to do a bit more in tax and spend as well, because you might need to have a sort of broader welfare state offer. And in that case, you probably need a really good deal, don't you, with the EU for the economy?
We do want a good deal, but we want to get cracking on it, and we want to lift the shadows and the clouds of uncertainty, and I think we're in a much better position with a stronger majority. And as to the other stuff, these aren't either-ors, and truth is, actually what the Prime Minister has offered has had a heavy emphasis on investing in public services. We've talked, and Sajid Javid has talked about, after a decade of recovery, after the recession, the financial crash, now having a decade of renewal. So I agree with you, but I think both of those things should be done at the same time.
Last question, Foreign Secretary. Well, you mentioned Sajid Javid. The Prime Minister said well, he's going to stay in his job if there's a reshuffle. Do you get any similar reassurances?
I wouldn't dream of preempting or prejudicing the decisions of the boss.
Such on-message modesty and self-effacing.
I'm going to have another go, though, John. I'm going to have another go.
Keep at it.
I'm going to have another go. Would you like to remain as Foreign Secretary?
Do you know what? First, every reshuffle, I say the same thing. I think it's really important that the head of a team, particularly the head of a government, has a total free hand to pick the team they need.
But there's no doubt there is going to be a reshuffle.
Well, there'd have to be, because there'll be some people who have stepped down, and there've been people, with people
not
like
from the top jobs.
And Nicky Morgan. So I think there'll be some changes. But look, that is the prerogative of the Prime Minister.
Dermot, can I just ask Dominic, because he's a very, very clever bloke, how long do you reckon the trade negotiation with the United States will take?
Well, they've, of course, got an election coming up, so I think there is an opportunity before that, and we ought to give it a good go.
What are those pigs I see flying in front of my very eyes?
You know, I tell you this, Mike Pompeo, who's the US Secretary of State, said to me, we are ready, pen in hand, to do a deal once you've left the EU. So one of the things that this will have, a knock-on effect, is, I think, a lining up of those countries that wanted to see which way the wind was going on Brexit, because that will affect the trade negotiations. So not only, if this is borne out, as we say again, not only is this good news for delivering Brexit, it will be good news for the wider global Britain agenda, which certainly the Foreign Office we're very keen on.
Well, Mr Raab, thank you very much indeed. We'll let you go off to your count. I mean, there's a small amount of remaining as an MP before you find out if you stay on as Foreign Secretary. Dominic Raab, thank you very much indeed. We are waiting, we are hearing it's going to happen fairly soon, the first official results in this general election campaign. We are keeping a hawk-like eye on both these counts in Newcastle and Sunderland. Sunderland were first to declare right up to the last general election. Newcastle nicked that crown away from them, and those two great cities are now vying between each other to be first to declare their MP for the new Parliament. It's also going to be fascinating to see, OK, maybe only two results, but these are strong Labour areas in the past. And if that exit poll is to be believed, well, then we are expecting the Conservatives to perform very well in areas like the North East. So even if there is a Labour MP returned in those declarations, we're going to take a very close look at the numbers in there, the change in the share of the vote, to see if the Conservatives are showing signs of making headway as deep into Labour territory as Newcastle and Sunderland. And on that very note, let's talk more about what the exit poll is suggesting for us. My colleague Ed Conway is going to talk us through the numbers and what it all means. Ed.
Yeah, thanks, Dermot. And obviously interrupt me if we do get a result from either Newcastle or Sunderland. We're waiting for those numbers. But let's have a look at the exit poll and what it's suggesting. In short, this looks like it's going to be an excellent night for the Conservative Party. If the exit poll is right, Boris Johnson could win 368 seats, would give them a majority government, 86, I believe it takes. Let's have a look, though, at how that actually plays out in our government builder. You can take those. These are kind of virtual seats in the House of Commons. So on the left side, you have the government benches. Let's add on the Conservatives, put them there on the government benches. And there we have it. They're over that line of 326 seats, giving them that majority, 86 majority. And our exit polls suggest, actually, look, on the right-hand side, those are the opposition benches. You can see there, Labour, if they get 191 seats, as the exit polls suggest, well, look how far they are from that line. An extraordinary potential result. Now, we're going to be keeping our eyes on the results as they come through from across the country. We've got a number of seats that the parties are getting. You can see that up there. That's the big dashboard there with those numbers. And let's fly past that, and you can see this hexagon map of the UK. That is it. Here in Sky HQ, we will be colouring that in with every constituency as they come in tonight, perhaps starting in the next few minutes. And it looks like it might well keep, that Labour might well actually be able to keep Kensington. We'll have a look, actually, because we've got a number of those seats and we do want to take a closer look. So let's get rid of those boards and we'll bring on a few of the interesting seats that we're going to be looking at. Actually, let's start with Don Valley. Potentially, now Caroline Flint is in place there, and that might well be one of those seats. We've been looking through the numbers on the exit poll. That might well be one of those seats which could eventually go to the Conservatives. So Caroline Flint there in Don Valley. Again, you know, these are seats which a lot of people thought were part of that Labour red wall that would be their defence, that would ensure that they wouldn't necessarily lose. Well, Don Valley might well be one of the seats that might go tonight. Let's have a look through as well around the country. I mentioned Kensington a moment ago. It's going to be a really interesting race there. And you can see there, that was a seat which Labour gained from the Conservatives by just 20 votes in 2017. So an incredibly narrow majority there, beating off competition from former Tory MP Sam Gyimah, who's standing for the Lib Dems. And then the exit poll actually suggesting that it might well be a good showing for Labour in the capital. So there you have Labour doing actually quite well in the capital. Labour doing well in cities, not so well in towns. That's one of those stories we've seen as the map of Britain has been changed, and we'll have much more about how that's changing over the course of the next few hours. And East Dunbartonshire, what about Scotland in general? I mean, but let's look at the Lib Dem leader, Jo Swinson, standing in East Dunbartonshire. The exit poll suggests her chances of losing her seat at the moment are about 50-50. It's about as narrow as it could possibly get for Jo Swinson. I mean, what an extraordinary story that would be for the Lib Dems potentially to lose their leader tonight. And the SNP, who would be potentially winning that seat if they get on the other right side of that 50-50, potentially with 55 seats, according to the exit poll, and that's within a whisker of their highest ever. And if you look across Scotland, it would leave only four non-SNP seats. Looks like it's 2 Tory, 1 Lib Dem and 1 Labour. I mean, extraordinary numbers. Let's see if those are borne out by the numbers that we get through from the results.
Exactly, Ed. It is going to be a quite extraordinary night if those exit poll results are matched by the results that are coming in. Just to alert you, we're expecting 2 or 3 very soon from the northeast, from Newcastle and Sunderland, maybe Blythe Valley as well. While we're awaiting those, I want to look at the picture in some more detail, what the exit poll has been telling us, particularly about the northeast, and our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, is behind me, crunching through some of those numbers, Sam.
Thank you, Dermot. Yes, we're about to get Sunderland and Newcastle in the next few minutes. So here's why the northeast is particularly useful to provide clues for how election nights are going to go. This is a Labour heartland. In 2017, something like 26 of the 29 seats in the region actually went Labour. But it was also a place that saw the only place in the country, the only region in the country to actually see a swing to the Conservatives. It is also a region that voted dramatically for Leave in 2016. So this has been a kind of crucible, a test case for the Conservatives. These are exactly the seats in the northeast. Some of these seats are exactly the ones that they've been trying to take. Now, the ones that you're going to see first probably have Labour majorities so big in Newcastle and Sunderland that the incumbents will keep them. But here's what to watch for. If the exit poll is right, then you should see a reduction in the Labour vote share. According to the exit poll, it's likely across the northeast that you might see a swing from Labour to the Conservatives of 5, maybe even 6%. That could give the Conservatives 5 or 6 gains in the northeast. Places like not only Bishop Auckland, Darlington, Sedgefield, possibly even Blythe Valley. So a number of places there where you could see Conservative gains. Blythe Valley, for instance, we're just hearing there's a recount there, so clearly that seat is too close to call. If I look at my sheet, that requires something like a 9.3% swing from the Labour Party to Conservatives, extraordinary swing to win there. So we're going to be looking at these early results about just how much the Labour vote falls and the Conservative vote rises.
OK, Sam, thank you very much indeed for that, hearing that recount in Blythe Valley. They were thought of as perhaps potentially going to be amongst the front runners to declare first in this general election, presumably out of the race there if they're going through a recount. But, of course, then it's down to the two favourites, Sunderland and Newcastle. We're hearing 4 or 5 minutes away in one of them anyway. Sunderland, Sarah Jane Mee is there. How close do they think they are?
Well, Dermot, I've just been given a 5-minute warning, so we're on standby for the first result to be delivered. It's around, 24 minutes past 11. They declared at around 5 past 11 the first result from Horton and Sunderland South in the last general election, so it's a bit slower. Is that because turnout has been higher? We don't yet know. Obviously, we'll find out more when the results are announced, but quite a few of those counting the votes have been sitting still for quite some time. I've been understanding that people have been getting texts from those at the Blythe Valley count saying that they were ahead, but as you've been saying, they're having a recount there. So Sunderland's still hopeful of getting the first result to be declared, but obviously they are saying that being accurate is more important. I'm just hearing that here in Sunderland there's been a 58%
OK, Sarah Jane, I'm cutting you off because
we'll be back to you when the result
Central
comes in.
Coming up on the rails. Sorry, Sarah Jane, over to Gillian in Newcastle. What's happening?
Yeah, silence has fallen. We believe that we're about to declare here. We haven't had an official declaration of that, but we were warned that it could be any time, and we can see Pat Ritchie going up to make the declaration, the returning officer. It will be for Newcastle Central, we're told.
Yeah.
And they were first in 2017, a lot later than they were at that time.
Yeah.
1 minute past 11, and we're now 11:25 p.m.
Can I have your attention, please? I'm ready to declare the result for Newcastle upon Tyne Central. I, Pat Ritchie, hereby give notice that the total number of votes for each candidate for the Newcastle upon Tyne Central constituency is as follows. Syed Ali Avey, also known as Ali Avey, 2,709. Mark Frederick Glenn Griffin, Brexit Party, 2,542. Chinyelo Susan Unwura, also known as Chi Unwura, 21,568. Emily Victoria Payne, the Conservative candidate, 9,290. Tamar Jem Pittman, also known as Tay Pittman, 1,365. And that Chi Unwura has been duly elected to serve as member for said constituency.
We have the result. Chi Unwura re-elected to the Newcastle Central constituency. Let's listen to her acceptance
speech. I'd like,
speech.
obviously, to start by thanking the returning officer for her excellent work, and also the police who have maintained our safety and security, and the amazing teams of Newcastle employees here and also in all the polling stations across Newcastle who have done such fantastic work to get us here. And I believe I am the first MP to be declared. Is that right? So for the moment, the entire British Parliament is...
Well, trailing in second, but not too far behind. The result coming in from Sunderland, Sarah Jane.
Returning officer hereby give notice
The returning officer is
that
just
the
about to
total
announce
number
the
of
results
votes for each candidate for the Horton and Sunderland South constituency is as follows. Richard Peter Bradley, Green Party, 1,125. Paul Edgeworth, Liberal Democrat, 2,319. Richard Elvin, UKIP, 897. Christopher John Charles Howarth, the Conservative Party, 13,095.
What's that? Oh, no. Not much.
Bridget Maeve Phillipson, Labour Party, 16,210. Kevin Lawrence Yule, Brexit Party, 6,165. And that Bridget Maeve Phillipson has been duly elected to serve as member for the said constituency. I'd like to invite the elected candidates to say a few words.
It is a privilege to have been
well, there
elected
you
for the
have it, the
fourth
result
time.
in for Horton and Sunderland South. It is a Labour win for Bridget Phillipson, who's just making her acceptance speech behind me. She got 16,210 votes, a much tighter race this time around, and a much smaller majority, a majority of 3,115. So a much tighter majority than last time. The majority in the last election was 12,341. So that has shrunk quite significantly, but it is still a Labour win for Horton and Sunderland South this evening. We're still waiting for Sunderland Central and Washington and Sunderland West. We'll bring you those results, Dermot, as soon as they come in.
Sarah Jane, thank you very much indeed, and thanks to Gillian in Newcastle. We want to go through both these results. They, yes, are the early declarers. Just for the record, Newcastle just beat Houghton and Sunderland South. But some pretty astonishing numbers coming out here. And let's stay with Houghton and Sunderland South and look at that majority. Yes, Bridget Phillipson is back and making her acceptance speech there as the continuing Labour MP for the constituency on a share of 40%, Conservatives on 32%, the Brexit Party on 15%. And look at this. This is perhaps going to tell us the tale of the evening. Labour way down in that share, that majority then shaved down, as Sarah Jane was saying, from 12 to 3,000, 18.7, nearly 19% down. The Conservatives up slightly. The Brexit Party, though, putting on 15.5%, gaining 15.5%. Of course, they didn't stand in the last election. The Lib Dems up a smidge, as are the Greens. And this argument by Boris Johnson that he was putting just on the eve of the election, and of course, as many Conservative supporters were saying to the Brexit Party. Now, you remember that the Brexit Party leader, Nigel Farage, said that they would not stand against Conservatives, but they did stand in the main. Some candidates pulled out. They did stand in the main against Labour candidates. The argument by Boris Johnson was that you will still split the Brexit vote. These could become, could you imagine Houghton and Sunderland South becoming a Conservative seat? Well, without the Brexit Party, that might have happened. And we had a recount in Blythe Valley. We're staying in the northeast. Again, a rock-solid Labour seat for so many years. Let's have a look at it. Blythe Valley, I'm just hearing, running in their third. They were close to declaring. This is by the by now. We're hearing a 10-point swing to the Conservative Party from the Labour Party.
Wow.
The Brexit Party there on 3,391, but it's those top two we need to look at. 17,440. Labour pushed down to 16,728. Ian Levy elected with a slim majority. They don't mind about that, those Conservatives. In Blythe Valley, John Bercow, as we talk through this, look at that. The Conservative vote share going up to 42.7%, up 5.4%. The Labour Party going down there, 15%, the Brexit Party up 8.3%. I was saying Boris Johnson's warning was that you'll take seats away from Conservative candidates. Well, perhaps they're also taking seats away from Labour candidates. But just that thought that here we are, this confirming very early on, I know, but the direction of this exit poll, if they're taking seats like this.
Yes, it certainly does. I mean, there are two catastrophic results for the Labour Party there. First, of course, in Blythe Valley, Roddy Campbell has represented that seat as the Labour Member of Parliament for about 3 decades. He's retired. There's a new Labour candidate. But it is a staggering result that Labour's vote share is so far down and that there is a Conservative MP for Blythe Valley. If you look at Houghton and Sunderland South...
There's never been a Conservative
MP for Blythe Valley. There's never been a Conservative MP for Blythe Valley. In Houghton and Sunderland South, where Bridget Phillipson has been re-elected, 3/4 of her majority has evaporated. It's gone down from over 12,000 to only just over 3,000. So those are hugely negative results for Labour. It's quite interesting to juxtapose them against the result in Newcastle for Cheon Wura. And Cheon Wura's majority was reduced, but by nothing like as big a margin. And it's not unrelated to the
through the prism of Brexit. I mean, that was a city that voted narrowly to remain.
Voted narrowly to remain, Sunderland heavily to leave. And there's an obvious link between the Brexit instinct on the one hand and how people...
OK, but, I mean, Beth Rigby, we are only dealing with 3 results, but look where they are, and 2 of them, as John Bercow was saying, catastrophic for Labour, even though they've held on there with Bridget Phillipson.
Yes, and I spoke to a Labour candidate in one of these red wall seats, if you like, these seats stretching from Wales across to Humberside, where the Tories are targeting vote leave areas. And this candidate said to me that they thought that these seats could go and it would be a matter of a few hundred votes and a number of seats. And look at that. They've gone from a Labour majority of 8,000 in Blythe Valley and it's gone Conservative by just 712 votes. That is extraordinary, isn't it?
Did you...
A 10% swing.
Beth, I mean, while you were on the road during the campaign, did you get that sense of just how deeply this Get Brexit Done slogan was resonating with a lot of Labour voters?
I did, and there was that was a theme running through many of the visits that I went on up into the Midlands and up into parts of the north. That Get Brexit Done was very powerful, but I have to say as well, it wasn't just Get Brexit Done.
It was the leader.
It was the leader, and actually, we're talking a lot about Boris Johnson's great strategy. He was also very lucky to have been up against an opponent that was actually a great asset for Boris Johnson because of the problems that Jeremy Corbyn was finding amongst many traditional Labour voters. They just didn't like him very much.
But why didn't it work last time round for Theresa May? Was that about
look,
leadership as well?
I think there was a couple of things. I think that the whole Brexit gridlock wasn't as embedded 2 years ago. I think things have changed. People are genuinely really fed up. And also Theresa May had a bad campaign. But thirdly, Jeremy Corbyn was an unknown in 2017.
Yeah, of course.
There was a Corbyn surge because people didn't know him. They'd read a lot of negative things about it. They saw him and they quite liked him. He was priced in this election, and there wasn't a kind of upside of who is Jeremy Corbyn. They knew what Jeremy Corbyn was like 2 years down the line from 2017 and just decided they didn't want him to be Prime Minister.
OK, well, listen, plenty more to discuss on that, obviously, but we want to talk through some numbers. As I say, only 3 results, but in these Labour heartlands, former Labour heartland in the case of Blythe Valley, Sam Coates has been telling... We were musing, Sam, about whether these results are going in the direction of the exit poll. It seems so.
Yes, bluntly, Dermot, the answer to that question is yes. It does appear as if there's nothing in the early results that would suggest that the exit poll is in any way out of line. Indeed, the early results suggest that the Conservatives could win 4 seats in the North East region. Bishop Auckland is also, therefore, under threat from the Tories. Darlington, Sedgefield and Stockton South now all really looking in danger. You can see that after the swings that we've seen. If you look at that result in Blythe Valley, the first gain for the Conservatives of the evening, you've got about a 10% swing from the Labour Party to the Conservatives. That's a huge swing, which is why quite so many votes, why quite so many seats in this region do seem to be going across into the blue column. You've also got a notable number of Brexit Party votes, over 3,000 of them, or 8%. But the stunning feature in the Blythe Valley seats, and frankly in all of the seats in the North East so far, is the decline in the Labour share of the vote. One other thing that's been borne out from the early exit poll is that the Labour vote seems to be going further down in Leave areas than Remain areas. The two Leave voting seats that we've seen, and Blythe Valley is 60% Leave, have been much more dramatic than those in the Remain seat of Newcastle upon Tyne.
OK, Sam, fascinating. We haven't got much to deal with in terms of hard and fast results, but they're certainly going, as Sam was saying there, in the direction of the exit poll. Well, plenty more seats to declare, 647 to be precise. But I want to talk there, as Sam was saying there, one of the features of what's gone on there in Newcastle, Sunderland and Blythe Valley is the performance of the Brexit Party. And you remember, just got to remind you that the Brexit Party stood in seats where there were Labour MPs from the last Parliament, not against the Conservatives. Got Jake Pugh with me here, Brexit Party MEP. First of all, your reaction to those pretty good performances there in the North East by your party.
It's fantastic, isn't it? And seeing where the vote is coming from. So I think in Newcastle, Labour were down 7, we were up 7. Very strong performance by Mark Pitt. That's the difference. Taking the vote from Labour absolutely validates the strategy. But Dermot, can I just say a couple of things first?
OK.
Isn't it the day when the people speak? Isn't it just absolutely fantastic? And also, I know it's just a poll, but absolutely we should be congratulating the Conservative Party if this is what has happened. And lastly, if I just may say, what an incredible night for the wider Brexiteer community.
I've got to ask you, I mean, you seem pretty happy, but obviously...
Sorry.
But no, but obviously...
the European Union.
Obviously, a lot of votes, but we are first past the post system and all that goes with that. But you got your chairman standing in Hartlepool, also in the North East there, looking at the count there. You got high hopes you might actually get a seat in Parliament?
Well, of course we hope to win seats. Of course we do. But I think we've been able to shift the agenda so extraordinarily. At the end of March, where we were then to where we are now, Theresa May left, the withdrawal bill failed twice, clean Brexit, nobody had ever mentioned clean Brexit. That moved centre stage. It's an
we can discuss further down the line what kind of Brexit that Boris Johnson might go for if he does get a majority like that. But you seem a bit out of kilter with your leader. Nigel Farage says, well, you know, that's why he was saying, you know, they need to be kept on the straight and narrow. The Conservatives under Boris Johnson will not deliver Brexit. This withdrawal agreement is not Brexit. In Nigel Farage's terminology, you just said there, we will get Brexit done.
We will be leaving. I didn't. I said we will be leaving. I didn't say that, Dermot, actually. I said we will be leaving.
But do you think Nigel Farage accepts that? He says it's going to be Brexit in name only. We're going to transition.
Dermot. I didn't use that expression. I said we will be leaving the European Union on the 31st of January.
Into transition.
And that is something that is very, very exciting. We said we were hard to be fired. To answer your question, are the deficiencies in the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration? Yes, we are. Now, it's going to be interesting to see, because the Prime Minister, if the polls deliver and he has a strong majority, he then has two choices. Does he then tack back to the centre? That's one option. Or does he turn round to the EU and say, right, we have a negotiated withdrawal agreement, we commit to that, but let's now negotiate the free trade agreement and sign the two off together. So go right back to the very first point where the UK made the mistake on the sequencing. New Parliament cannot bind the previous. So that is absolutely a perfectly... So he might go one way, he might tack back to the centre, a softer Brexit, or he might say, new Parliament, we'll stick with the withdrawal agreement, but we'll sign the two documents.
Brexit Party is clearly in a state of paranoid anxiety at this point, for the very simple reason that we flagged up earlier, that there is this choice, a choice between pivoting to the right or pivoting to the centre. And that is the luxury that the Prime Minister, if he has this humongous majority, can indulge. He can choose. He can go centre which will infuriate the Brexit Party, or he can go far out to the right and a clean break, hard Brexit. And of course, the Brexit Party would love that. It wouldn't necessarily serve the interests of the British people.
Sorry, just pause you a moment. That's all I want to do, because we want more results to give us more grist to our mill statistics, and we've been looking at the North East. Swindon North is due to declare shortly. It's a Leave-leaning seat, a Leave voting seat in the referendum in 2016. Swindon North is pretty solidly Conservative, so we are waiting to see. This change in share of the vote is going to be fascinating. See if it works down there in Swindon as well as it has in the North East. But Jake Pugh, your point is you just don't know, don't you? I mean, if Boris Johnson does get a majority like that, as John Bercow is saying, well, as we've been saying earlier, it was the ERG in his own party who were pushing, let me term it, hard Brexit, pushing him closer and closer to that, the WTO, the clean Brexit, let's call it that. He's now in a position, if he wants, for instance, to extend the transition period, even bring back, what? The backstop.
Well, yeah, extending the transition period would be a strange place to go, I think, for anybody. I mean, we've heard it so many times. Get Brexit done. Interesting, they've dropped the oven ready in the last few days because everybody got bored with that. It clearly didn't work in the focus groups. But absolutely, they have options. But I would have thought extending is not really going to fit with where they are. Is negotiating an FTA a complicated process? Of course.
Okay. But if Boris Johnson has that sort of majority, he absolutely can extend. He can do what he wants. And ironically, it could end up, couldn't it, that we are negotiating for longer in order for him to try and get as good a trade deal as he can, because he will have one eye on the economy and probably a tax and spend programme to try and keep all these seats. It looks like he's going to win at the next election.
Absolutely. All those options are open. Of course they are. Of course they are. Sorry.
Beth, I suppose the question that Jake has to ask himself and answer for himself is this.
Well, you put it to him.
Does Boris Johnson feel as passionately about having a complete, clean, hard break from the EU as the Brexit Party does? Now, many people would say that what Boris is absolutely passionate about is Boris becoming and remaining Prime Minister and holding power and wielding it and doing what he thinks at the time, at any particular time, is right. He doesn't have necessarily that ideological commitment.
I've got to put that back at you. You say many people, John Bercow. Are you one of them that says that?
Who knows the answer
about Boris Johnson?
Oh, well, I've always thought that Boris Johnson is a kind of Disraelian figure in the sense that he thinks first and foremost that politics is about the acquisition and retention of power. He travels relatively light ideologically. And we all know that historically he's had different positions on the European Union. I don't say that rudely. I simply say that as a statement of fact. He doesn't have that ideological rigour, or dare I say it, fanaticism, which characterises the Brexit Party. That is something, I think, that is going to cause Mr Pugh much loss of sleep in the weeks, months and years ahead.
Well, it certainly won't cause me a loss of sleep. The answer that you posed the question about Boris Johnson's character, clearly, John, you know him better than anybody else on this panel. But I think he has multiple options open to him. To say that it is fanatical to wish to leave all the institutions of the European Union, to not have a treaty under which you're bound by the rule of the ECJ, and there's an independent arbitration committee that always has to look to the ECJ for the decision. If you think that is fanatical, then, of course, that you're entitled to that opinion. But
time up.
We don't see that as fanatical.
Thank you very much indeed. A very interesting gentleman. Jake Pugh, thank you very much indeed, Jake Pugh from the Brexit Party. I want to talk about the Lib Dems and Scotland now rolled up in one. We are going to talk to Christine Jardine in a moment or two. Just to alert you, we've told you already, we're expecting a fourth declaration so far this evening. Going to be a very long evening, could be a very long evening indeed for the Labour Party. If the exit poll is to be believed, the declaration expected there in Swindon North fairly shortly. I mentioned they're going to Edinburgh to talk to Christine Jardine for the Liberal Democrats. And a very good evening to you, Christine Jardine. And may I first of all ask you, on the back of that exit poll, just personally, it's suggesting you may be in quite a lot of trouble holding on to your seat.
I don't know. The exit poll is saying that we will lose seats, but, you know, it gives a good national picture, but it doesn't drill down into the individual seats, and I think we need to look at that more closely. We have a lot of marginal seats, particularly in Scotland, where there's not the same coverage for the poll as there is down south. So I think we'll see as the evening goes on if the poll is correct. But I think it's too early at the moment to be absolutely sure. We're all a little surprised because it doesn't reflect what we've been getting on the doors. So we'll have to see whether the picture that we've been getting on the doors is right or whether the poll is right. And at the moment, it's too early to say.
Can't deny that. But what we can discuss is, you mentioned being on the doors. Oh, I'm sorry, Christine Jardine. We will come back to you if we can.
That's OK.
If you can hang on. We're getting a declaration, I'm told, in Swindon North. No, we see movement and we jump on it. As I say, we're watching all these early counts as closely as we possibly can. Did that sound a bit like you there, John Bercow? No.
No. Hyper.
I hope
excited.
not. Yes, well, we are.
In a state of eager anticipation,
getting very excited. It's going to be a fascinating evening. Christine Jardine, we can come back to you.
Yes.
Just this, what you were hearing on the doors, did this revoke Article 50 argument? I mean, didn't people say to you, that's going a bit far? They may have said, well, I am a Remainer, but I think there should at least be another referendum.
No, actually, what the YouGov poll tells us is that it was popular. Amongst Remainers, there was 67% approval rate for it. So it's, if people want to remain in the European Union, they liked that line. And I think it's oversimplifying to say that that line particularly was unpopular. And I think we'll have to wait and see. And after the election, and we have all the votes counted, then we will have a proper picture. And we'll see which seats have done better than others and which way the marginal seats, which way they go. Because there are a lot of seats which even the exit poll is saying are too close to call. So we'll just have to wait and see. OK. Well, and talk to me about the campaign in Scotland. Of course, it was termed the Brexit election, but there was a big dollop of Indie Ref 2 thrown in there as well, wasn't there? Did that make it doubly difficult for the Liberal Democrats? No. We had a lot of support for our anti-independence stance because, let's remember, we don't know yet how the votes will break down this time. But in 2017, the SNP had 977,000 votes, I think, and there was 1.6 million people voted for want of a better term, Unionist party. So, we have to wait and see tonight what happened. And we saw in the summer that the SNP threw everything they had at a Scottish parliamentary by-election in Holyrood, where they actually spent more than they had done in the entire Remain referendum campaign. And they didn't win the Scottish by-election. So, it's quite difficult to see where this poll result tonight has come from. And I think we will see clearer later in the evening, but at the moment, it's too soon to say. OK,
with all those caveats, we've had precious few results so far. But if it is, round about 13 seats, this exit poll prediction for the Liberal Democrats, even, 2, 3, 4, 5 more, it's not really a vindication of the strategy and not really an endorsement of your leader, is it? Do you think you might have to look at that?
No. What we've seen in this campaign is the Labour Party, a disastrous campaign from the Labour Party, but the Labour Party and the Conservative Party almost sort of contrive to keep anybody else out of it, to squeeze everybody else out of the debate. Boris Johnson not turning up for interviews, and the lack of scrutiny, which is important to any democracy, and seeing the variety of voices, hearing all the opinions. That, to me, is what's fundamental to having a sound democracy. And I think we have to be careful that in the future we hear all those voices, not just us, but the Green Party as well, and other parties.
Yeah, but you seem to be saying Jo Swinson suffered, and of course she was excluded from those two head-to-head leadership debates. You seem to be suggesting she suffered from lack of exposure, yet the polling did tell us, and it may be harsh to say, but it's what the polls told us, that the more people saw of Jo Swinson, the less they liked her.
I don't accept that. What you're seeing is a campaign that went on where, yes, we were squeezed, but I really don't think you can place that on Jo. She ran a very strong campaign. That interview she did with Andrew Neil was excellent. A lot of people like that. So, you know, no politician is ever going to please all the people all the time. And, you know, I think we need to look further at this. Once we have all the details, we can examine the results in detail, but not at the moment. And I don't want to go down that line.
But, I mean, I don't know if you've spoken to her tonight, Jo Swinson, tonight, or not in East Dunbartonshire, but again, the exit poll saying she could be in trouble there. Therefore, the leadership question would presumably be answered if she doesn't win that seat.
Well, the poll in Scotland is very surprising, and it's not what any of the parties have been seeing on the ground. So either we've got it completely wrong, or there's something wrong in the exit poll, and I think it's too soon to know which. What we can see is that there are a lot of marginals, and the exit poll doesn't pick that up. Scotland's got, I think, a higher proportion of marginals than the rest of the country, and the last time it didn't pick up that North East Fife was going to be as close as it was. I mean, 2 votes were all that were in it. So I think I know I'm sounding like a slightly broken record here, but we do have to wait until we've got all the votes counted.
We certainly do. Last quick question, though, and I still have to, you'll accept I have to just go more or less on the exit poll. Yes. But we're hearing from Humza Yousaf from the SNP saying that if they do get 55 seats, well, he was almost saying, well, that's almost an irresistible argument to be made to Westminster about having a second independence referendum. Would you, if it was on that scale, the victory for the Scottish National Party, would you see it that way?
No, I'm afraid I am a Scot and British, and I don't see our future anywhere else but in the United Kingdom, and I will work to keep us there. And I don't accept that the national interest, Scotland's interest, is in going through another constitutional, bitter, divisive constitutional debate. We've had 8.5 years of it in Scotland. We've had enough.
OK, Christine Jardine, thank you very much indeed. I'm adding you to my growing list now of people from the parties that perhaps haven't done as well as they might have expected in these predictions from the exit poll. My list of people we need to speak to when the results are finally in hard and fast. And Ed Conway's here now. And Ed, we've been looking at the results we do have, and in particular, the performance of the Labour Party in some of those seats that have been rock solid in the past. A few of them stayed that way, but Blythe Valley, what's going on?
And I'll show you in a second, actually. Let me do it straight away, just show you what that actually means for Labour's defence, actually, because we have this chart basically showing you each of the seats that Labour is defending. So remember that these seats, pretty much all grey at the moment. These are the seats Labour are defending, and at the start of the night, all of these were red, OK? So these are Labour seats, and it would take up to a 4% swing for the Conservatives, or indeed other parties, to win these seats. So Reading East, Croydon Central would take up to 6%, Stoke-on-Trent Central, Wirral West up to 8%, but look at this, up to 10% swing it would take to win Blythe Valley. We are starting. The first gain for the Tories is right at the end of the spectrum of what a lot of people expected. And this is Labour's red wall. You heard that talk about the red wall that Labour was defending. It wanted to withhold the Tories, particularly in these seats here. Well, right from the start, they have lost one on a pretty enormous swing, a 10% swing. And what's the story behind that? Well, come back and have a look at this. We're going to actually kind of drill into a few of those seats. So let's drill into Blythe Valley and, indeed, some of the other seats. Come over here and see some of the stories kind of behind them. So this is the change in the share of the vote. You see the Tories up by 5.4%, but look at Labour down by 15%. And Brexit Party up by 8.3%. And then if we have a look at Houghton and Sunderland South, kind of, similar story, actually. Labour down 19% there in terms of the share of the vote. The Tories up by 3.2%. Brexit up by 15.5%, obviously from a kind of start of zero, effectively. And here you have Newcastle upon Tyne Central as well. It's a similar story. Labour just cratering votes across these constituencies. And what do Houghton and Sunderland South and Blythe Valley have in common? It is the fact that they are strong Brexit-supporting areas. It is the Brexit vote which might well decide this election. We talked about it being the Brexit election and how right that might well turn out to be. Have a look at this, the map of the UK with all the different constituencies. Let's take these and plot them against their Brexit vote. So that's the most Remain over there, moving through here to kind of middle of the road to the most Leave seats. And there we have Blythe Valley. So that's there. You can see they voted just around kind of 60% to leave the EU. And what we are potentially going to see, if the exit poll is right, is around this area, which is Labour's red wall. We're about to see a lot of these seats potentially turning blue, if the exit poll is to be believed. So we're going to be plotting all of these results against all of this. Now, in the past, it might have taken some days for people to work out this kind of analysis, showing you about how the map is changing, what kind of divisions we're seeing in this country. We're going to try and do it for you tonight over the course of the next few hours. So stay tuned as we get more of these numbers through.
OK, I want to continue on that theme that Ed's been describing to us, John Bercow, and just how many of those seats on the far right of his map go blue. I mean, just looking at the exit poll and taking the maths, and a good performance for the SNP in Scotland, who presumably have, on that count, would have to take a lot of Conservative seats. They also predicted to lose a few in London and the South East. Well, if they're picking up that number, they're coming from Labour in the heartlands, aren't they?
Yes, I mean, it certainly looks like several dozen Labour-held seats are going to be lost in the north, including the North East and the North West, and the Midlands. And as you rightly say, just computing the statistics shows that the Conservatives must have lost at least 8 seats in Scotland. Now, if overall they're nevertheless having a majority of 86, that translates into huge gains at Labour's expense in Labour heartlands.
OK. And Beth, I mean, you looked at the body language. I'm sure you watched particularly Barry Gardiner from Labour. You know, normally so ebullient.
He looked a bit shell-shocked, didn't he?
Yeah.
He did. And look, I mean, fascinating detail as well. I should say Ronnie Campbell was the outgoing Labour MP in Blythe Valley. He was much loved. He was a Brexiteer. He told people to go out and vote Tory because he wanted to quote the Prime Minister, get Brexit done. But if you actually drill down into that exit poll and you extrapolate it out, my goodness, we could see some big upsets. It looks like Laura Pidcock in Durham North West.
A future leadership candidate.
Yeah, her seat looks potentially under threat. You've got Sedgefield, Tony Blair's former seat, could go. Bishop Auckland, Darlington, Stockton South. It could be close in Wandsbrook. That's Ian Lavery's seat. Too close to call in Wirral West. That's Margaret Greenwood's seat. I just want to put it into the context of this could be a big clear-out of the Labour Party and a big restructuring of the electoral map of our country.